morning, everyone, and welcome to the November 13th session of the Montgomery County Council. Thank you, former Mayor Katz. And we will begin today, as we often do, with an invocation. We are joined by Reverend Douglas Bratt of the Silver Spring Christian Church. And Mr. Bratt, Reverend Bratt, you'll use the microphone there, and we invite those who are here to rise as they are able.
I invite you to pray with me if you wish. Creator and sustainer of all that is good, we thank you for this new day and for this new session of our county council. O God, who delegates authority and responsibility, we thank you for all these people who offer their time, insights, and talents to serve you by serving our council. We thank you for calling and equipping them to do their sometimes challenging work. O God, turn your face toward our retiring council executive, Mr. Leggett, our new executive, Mr. Elric, as well as our retiring incumbent and new county council members. Look kindly on all who work with them for the good of our county and the well-being of all of its residents. Please help all of us to keep leading our county with wisdom and integrity. O God, whose heart is especially for the poor and the vulnerable, continue to give these your servants a heart for those we so easily marginalize, so that all of us together may flourish. Grant that under this council's leadership, we who have been given so much will know better how to care for both our county and those who have less. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you for those words. And we will now move to presentations. We have two proclamations this morning. And the first is a proclamation recognizing the 40th anniversary of the Commission on People with Disabilities. And that will be presented by myself, and on behalf of the county executive, I believe Mike Subin, who is on the commission, is here or will be here, or perhaps not. So I would like to invite Dr. Seth Morgan and Betsy Looking and all current or former commission members. I will be there at that microphone, and if you wish, if you have a chair and you want to be in front or standing behind the table here, join us now. Thank you. All right. Is this on? Good. Well, this is a special moment. We are recognizing one of the county's leading voices, which is our Commission for People with Disabilities. And we are joined by many commission members, past and present, and our terrific staff. Betsy informed me she's been staffing this commission for more than 20 years, 26 years, which is amazing. With Carly Clem. There's Carly. And this community is a community that is really a test of our county's commitment to inclusion and to public policy and to infrastructure and to decision making that is really for all. And we are succeeding with supports that are needed and policies that are needed for our community of people with disabilities. We're succeeding for all Montgomery County residents, and we really count on the community leadership of those who step into these roles to hold us accountable and keep your issues, our issues, front and center. So, Dr. Morgan, thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. This is a historic day for our commission, our 40th anniversary of our foundation, and this really reflects the support that we have all gotten from county council members through the years, county executives through the 40 years and currently. We are effective because people listen to us, and we are able to give opinions that have impacts on how the county proceeds with advancing the involvement of people with disabilities in the county. Frankly, no legislation has ever been offered or voted on by the commission. The commission doesn't have that power. We are purely advisory to the to the county government, and frankly, if we don't have a responsive county government, we would not be effective at all. And the fact that we are such a forward-thinking, cutting-edge county in terms of what is offered in this county. For instance, we have the hiring preference, and that is a big deal. We are, I believe, the first county to give hiring preference for qualified individuals with disabilities who apply for jobs in the county, in the county government. We have been involved with special tax incentive for improving the accessibility of homes when they are renovated or when they are first built, and through that able to hopefully increase the housing availability for people with disabilities. There are just too many different individuals and initiatives to list them all. I hope you'll have a chance to look at our yearly report, which lists some of the issues, but we have been very fortunate, and I foresee this commission continuing to advise, and sometimes we don't see eye to eye, and we tell the individuals involved when we don't. So for the most part, we have had a very positive and interactive relationship, and we appreciate everything that the county government has provided to our commission. So thank you very much.
Would you just care to introduce our commissioners, past and present? Because I don't think it'll work to pass the microphone since it's a corded mic, but maybe you could come here, please, if you would. Yeah.
Let's see, now you're testing me. You help me out? Okay. This is Trish Galloway. She was chair for 6 years, and then she was off a year and came back because she loved it, and we love her, of course. We have Carl Printer, we have Ruth Martinez, Tom Liniak, Steve Robinson, Henry Kaplan, Karen Margaret, Steve Haig, and she's helping me out. All right, so that's it, and of course, Seth.
Thank you so much. So I'll now read the proclamation. Yeah. Whereas, on October 17th, 1978, the County Council established the Commission on People with Disabilities, which at that time was called the Commission on Handicapped Individuals. We commemorate 40 years of the Commission advising the county government on disability issues and programs that has led to the county becoming a leader in the nation on disability issues. The Commission advises on promoting opportunity in employment, housing, state and local government services, recreation, transportation, telecommunications, and in all areas of public accommodations. And whereas the Commission, along with the Montgomery County government, is committed not only to the letter but the spirit of the American with Disabilities Act through efforts including any needed county legislation that promotes inclusive programs, equal employment opportunity, and equal access to county services for all people without barriers or limitations in services. And whereas Montgomery County is committed to excellence and innovation in empowering people with disabilities and their families to live the lives of their choice in our community. And now, therefore, do we, Isaiah Leggett as County Executive and Hans Reamer as Council President in the 40th year of the Commission, hereby recognize and commemorate the outstanding work of the Commission on People with Disabilities. We want to thank all commissioners who have served our community so well for the past 40 years and call upon all residents, government, nonprofit agencies, and businesses to redouble efforts to promote and ensure equal opportunity, full community participation, and economic self-sufficiency for people with disabilities. Signed today. Thank you so much. Now, we are going to take a photo, and I will invite council members to rise behind, I think, if that's visible. Juan, okay?
Okay.
Great, now we're going to recognize a nonprofit organization that is part of the leadership for our county in providing, as the last proclamation said, support for people with disabilities to live the lives that they choose, and that is the Jewish Social Services Agency, JESA. And we are joined, I know, by Jay Kennedy, who's recently joined, and you're the Executive Director, Todd Shank. So if you'll come forward, please, and anyone who's here for the proclamation. Right. Well said. So, here we go. I'm going to turn it to Jessa to share some comments, but we are honoring you today because Jessa's Specialized Employment Program has been honored as the Disability Employment Provider of the Year in the state of Maryland by Maryland Works. So that is an important accomplishment, and we're really proud of your work, and the county wants you to know that we're behind you, and we really are celebrating what you're doing for everyone in this county. So I'd like to ask you to share some reflections. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tom Liniak. I'm the Director of Specialized Employment at JESA. And, personally, I want to thank my son, John, who's my inspiration in all of this. I want to thank my wife, who's a co-founder of Sports Plus with me. Everybody at JESA for, number one, my staff making me as the director look really good, and the leadership for providing the opportunity to do things a little different and do things a lot better. We've created something at JESA with a lot of people who are very, very able. And we have used those abilities and matched them to true needs with employers. In that, we have a different way that's proven to be very successful, something that we look forward to expanding. Thank the County Council, County Executive for their support of our efforts there as well. What we'd like to do is not make this the exception, but make this the way, because that's what it should be. Thanks a lot.
Very good. I'll read the proclamation now. Whereas we celebrate the Jewish Social Services Agency Specialized Employment Program for being honored as the Disability Employment Provider of the Year in the state of Maryland by Maryland Works. And whereas JESA strives to be a model for local jurisdictions and private sector employers in the increased hiring of qualified people with disabilities, as demonstrated by JESA in achieving a new record high in the number of client, quality, and dollar value of placements for a fourth consecutive year. And whereas the JESA has maintained a non-traditional job placement rate at multiple times higher than the state and national averages, achieving an 88% six-month retention rate for employed clients and adding more than 40 new employer hiring partners for a fourth consecutive record year with annualized cumulative client wages of $1.7 million. And whereas a new pre-employment summer jobs program and internships for teens with disabilities was implemented with RSV pools and was the largest paid summer jobs program with a private employer in the county. And whereas JESA's work in its pre-employment and permanent jobs programs was the subject of 2 feature stories on WJLA, the local ABC affiliate for the Greater Washington metropolitan area. And whereas JESA is taking significant steps to address the high unemployment rate of individuals with disabilities by providing innovative career development and training programs which lead to increased levels of employment. Now therefore be it resolved that the County Council proclaims November 13th as JESA Specialized Employment Awareness Day in Montgomery County, and be it further resolved that the County Council encourages its residents and employers to interview, hire, train, and maintain employees with disabilities so that they can contribute their skills and talents to the economic growth of our community, as evidenced by the work of JESA Specialized Employment Program. Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here. Now we will do the photo, and why don't we stand, I think, behind, and the council members will rise again. Is that work? Let's see if that, are you up a little bit, or are we? Okay. You okay? We'll figure it out. Just find our space. Does that work?
Got it.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Okay, now, just to state the obvious, we're not usually in this room on the 7th floor, and it's because there's a power outage on the 3rd floor. We're hoping that there will be a repair made, apparently something outside the building, and if it is made, we will reconvene downstairs. We are not going to do our 11 o'clock topic here on this floor because we don't have the lights, which is why it's dark behind council dais here. It's not usually the way we would do it, and it's part of the outage that is also affecting the 3rd floor. So the 11 o'clock discussion we will hopefully have this afternoon downstairs in the full room or in a place that has lighting. And now I will turn to general business and announcements, acknowledgement, and actions. Ms. Lamarzi.
Thank you. Good morning. The council is in receipt of one petition. It's signed by 35 persons and from the National Integrated Health Associates opposing ZTA 1811 telecommunications towers approval standards. And that is all they have this week.
Okay. And now we'll turn to the minutes for October 23rd, 2018. And those minutes were distributed in advance to all council members. Are there any corrections to the minutes? All right. Seeing none, those are approved as submitted. And Mr. Rice.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to take a moment of personal privilege, and it ties into something that we're going to be discussing in our consent calendar in a moment. But this is the first Tuesday that we've met in November. And November, as many people know, is also known as Movember. And the state of men's health is in crisis. And men experience worse long-term health than women and die on average 6 years earlier. Prostate cancer rates will double in the next 15 years. Testicular cancer rates have already doubled in the last 50 years. 3/4 of suicides are by men. Poor mental health leads to 500,000 men taking their own lives every single year. That's one every minute. The reason why, and my wife and daughters now call me Fuzzface, the reason why I am growing this beard and mustache is to make sure that we raise awareness for the challenges that men continue to face when it comes to health. And we know that those actually are exacerbated in our communities of color. And so for our African American, for our Latino, Hispanic communities, and our Asian American communities, we see those rates even higher in those populations. It is incredibly important that our fathers, our partners, our spouses, our uncles, our nephews, that we all talk about health in the context of men. Unfortunately, we see ourselves as gladiators. The reality is that any gladiator still can fall and succumb to some of the powerful diseases that we see, whether it be cancer or mental health. We've got to talk about it more, and we can't afford to stay silent. And so I encourage you all to please talk to your family members. Talk to them about getting checked and tested. If you see a veteran that you know is acting a little bit different, please say something. Talk to them. Encourage them to get help. We just ended Veterans Day, and we see in our community what continues to happen for people who don't have their mental health evaluated and given the support that they need. Let's not lose another life that we don't have to. And that comes from making sure that we're all talking about it and encouraging people to get the help that they need. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. This is not the first November you've raised these issues, and appreciate that very much. All right, now we have a consent calendar to take up. It's been moved by Mr. Berliner, seconded by Council Vice President Navarro. And, all right. So, thank you for letting me know your light is on. I don't know how to determine the order. I'm going to call you first, Council Vice President Navarro.
The only one that's on, yeah.
Oh, is it? Okay,
Yeah,
I
good
can't tell
morning.
that.
Thank you so much. I wanted to point out that on our consent calendar, we have item 2B, which is a special appropriation for the county government's FY19 operating budget. This is a non-departmental account, $95,600 for legislative branch communications outreach. As is stated in the packet, this will improve access to information, publicize the ways that residents can express their views, data access and reports, and it will fund a new staff person to focus exclusively on social media outreach, analytics, and visual information. This funding will backfill an existing vacant position in the county's communication office that was not funded in this fiscal year. Also to start an internship program to have Montgomery College students serve in a help desk capacity for information technology and contractual services for additional community outreach. Obviously, the packet has a lot more information about the specifics, but this is to enhance our ability to continually communicate with our very sophisticated constituency and make sure that we can be as responsive as possible. In addition, I wanted to ask the clerk to add me as a co-sponsor to item O, which is the special appropriation to the FY19 operating budget for Montgomery County Government Department of Health and Human Services, and this is for the African American Health Program. I know Council President and Councilmember Rice have co-sponsored this request, and I very much would like to be added as a co-sponsor as well, given the disparities that have been articulated so well. And I know Councilmember Leventhal, as chair of HHS, has been such a champion in ensuring that we address all these issues. So I think this is a very important request as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Vice President Navarro. And, yeah.
My light is not.
Your light is not working. Okay, I'll,
The microphone also. I just wanted to be added as a co-sponsor on the special appropriation for the African.
okay, why don't I ask for co-sponsors, if you'd like to be co-sponsored? Mr. Leventhal, Mr. Katz, Ms. Florine, Mr. Hucker, Mr., we'll give them a chance later to, they're focused, yes. I expect the answer is yes, right? Yes, all right, very good. Mr. Rice.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. And again, just wanted to highlight the need for this. It's interesting because as I had quoted about the statistics, black men in Montgomery County have twice the rate of prostate cancer compared to their white counterparts. And it's certainly something that I know personally. My father, who is now 8 years in remission from prostate cancer, also a veteran. And so it certainly is something in which, again, we need to try and make sure that we're outreaching to our community by having this registered nurse to be able to help and assist to getting out into the community, but also serving as a front line and making sure that we're working with folks. We know that staffing, and it's one of the things that I'm certainly concerned about when it comes to our Health and Human Services budget for next year, is going to be staffing to ensure that we have the frontline resources necessary to ensure that no person is turned away nor is scheduled away. One of the constant things that we hear is that by not being able to get services right away, folks don't come back. And if they don't come back, it's much harder for us to give them the support that's necessary. And by putting these front lines in place, I look forward to working with our other minority health initiatives in this upcoming budget as well, to really make sure that we're beefing up our resources. If we're going to be serious about the fact of us stamping out a lot of the racial disparities that we continue to see when it comes to health, we're going to have to put our money where our mouth is. So thank you very much, Mr. President, for initiating this action.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Pleased to work with you on this, and just wanted to add that we were working on a funding plan for this out of funds that were made available for relocation, and it just kept kind of, it wasn't resolved, and we were hoping to have that source. We decided it was just time to move ahead and get this done, so we could close the books on that, on this during this session. Now, next up. Okay, that's my microphone, and there is a, no, okay, there's a microphone on over there. All right, and any other comments on the consent calendar? I just want to thank everyone who has offered or requested to serve on an advisory committee. There are many names of county residents who are on various boards and commissions, and we really appreciate your work. We're not going to have the opportunity to read each name, as there are quite a few of them, but we are excited and appreciative of your service, and your participation in these boards and commissions is an important part of our civic infrastructure here, and we're grateful for that. And when we have the consent calendar moved and seconded, all in favor, please raise your hands. And that is unanimous. All right, and now we will turn to work session on a handful of items. I will turn it to Marlene Michelson and Jean Arthur for the first item, and we will need a motion and a second after we have been briefed on this. Welcome to the Parks Department.
So you have a series of 5 special appropriations in front of you. We'll start with the first one, which is the small grant. And, next to me is Carl Morgan and Mr. Riley and Gary.
Casey Anderson.
You know, introduce yourself and where you're from, Park and Planning. And the first one, this one, it does not involve county money. It's the appropriation is to allow Park and Planning to spend money that's been raised by Montgomery Parks Foundation.
Okay, great. So this was raised by Montgomery Parks Foundation. Very good. I think this one is probably pretty non-controversial.
I'll move that.
It's been moved by Mr. Leventhal, seconded by Mr. Katz. All those in favor, this is a show of hands. Very good. All right, that is unanimous.
Go spend the money.
All right, thank you for raising that money. Yeah. And our second item, Ms. Arthur.
The next one, the appropriation is for, it's $116,562,000 for local parks. Again, it's not county fund, it's to allow Park and Planning to use Program Open Space Fund. Program Open Space is a state program.
Very good. All right. Been moved by Mr. Rice. Second by Ms. Navarro. All those in favor, show of hands. And that is unanimous.
Okay, the next one is for ADA compliant non-local parks. You got some testimony about that, because it will allow to make Riley's Lock compliant, ADA compliant. Again, not county fund, it's a grant from the state of Maryland, and the Disability Commission has been very involved in, in getting that change up at Riley's Lock.
Right. Been moved by Mr. Rice, seconded by Mr. Katz. All those in favor? That is unanimous.
Okay, well, the next one is county funding, and it's the Maydale Nature Center sub-project. You've talked about this, you talked about it during budget, about wanting to reopen the nature center at Maydale. You also got testimony in support of this. This funding is to do life safety improvements. Most of it is for that.
Very good. Motion moved by Mr. Berliner.
Second.
Second by Ms. Navarro. All those in favor, show of hands. That's unanimous.
The next one is, again, county funding, and this is the Josiah Henson Historic Park. It's for the museum and other improvements in that park. We had a wonderful public hearing where we talked to a relative of Josiah Henson about just the legacy of Mr. Henson.
Yes.
So it's before you, we need the extra money because it came in higher than expected. And a lot of other changes that have to be made, so.
Moved by Mr. Blenner, seconded by Mr. Rice. All those in favor? Is that unanimous? Mr. Elwich? Yep. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we had a good public hearing. We heard about these terrific items. We look forward to success in building them.
This is normally how your budget process goes, right? I mean, it's just, you know, quick and unanimous, yeah, we're good.
All right. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
All right, now we will turn to legislative session day number 26. We are right on time. Our first bill for introduction is Bill 3618, Transportation Management, Transportation Demand Management Plan Amendments. This is lead sponsor, Council President Reamer, at the request of the County Executive. The public hearing is scheduled for December 4th at 1:30. I just wanted to make a comment on this. Council Member Berliner, Chair of the Transportation Committee, and I have worked on this issue for some time. I think it's probably been about a year and a half, maybe 2 years. We've been working with the executive branch to reform an important part of the development process, which is the Transportation Mitigation Agreement component. And when there is a project that doesn't quite fit neatly in the box, there can be a very extensive and lengthy negotiation over transportation mitigation that really injects a lot of uncertainty and often delay into the development process. And we have identified this as something that could be improved with a more formulaic approach focused on transportation demand management. And so the legislation establishes a new regime where development, as projects come in, they can pick from a set of categories of transportation demand management programs and then implement them and be accountable for them year after year. And the basic goal is to reduce the number of vehicle trips in order to match the policy goals of that area, so that the property owners are working with their tenants or their residents to ensure that they are using modes of transportation that reduce vehicle trips, whether that's public transportation or biking or walking or carpooling or van pooling or other modes. So we're trying to shift the focus into active management and in kind of intelligent, smart transportation management. We have had a feedback process with the development industry to get their thoughts on it. And we'll hear more about that, I'm sure, at the public hearing. Bob Dummer, anything you need to add there? No?
No.
All right.
You explained it.
Okay, and so that item has been introduced. Next item is item B, expedited bill 3718, transient housing short-term rental license appeals. Lead sponsor, Councilmember Florine. The public hearing is scheduled for December 4th at 1:30. And I'm not sure any comment is necessary. I believe this is making it consistent with this is to Mr. Zients. There you are. Thank you.
This bill just makes an easy appeal process for short-term rentals. It was inadvertently excluded from that ability when we created this category and didn't put them in the appeal category.
Thank you, Mr. Zients. Next item is C, expedited bill 3818, weapons urban area boundary. This is at the request of the county executive. A public hearing is set for December 4th at 1:30. Jeff, could you explain this one? There's been a few inquiries about it. I think it's a little confusing.
I hope it's not too confusing. The county gets to establish an urban area in which the discharge of firearms is prohibited. That area has not changed in the last 20 years. There has been development in the Up County in the last 20 years. This was recommended by the executive, although it was not recommended in the normal course of events. The legislation currently says that it needs to have come from the Firearms Committee on February 1st. This didn't do that, but there's an exemption in the bill to allow this change to occur. Basically, it's in the uncodified section. The police had complaints in an area, now I don't know if I can pronounce this street name, Croom Road. And in this area, there had been a number of complaints. The police investigated and found that everything was legal at the time. This would make shooting in that area illegal.
Suffice to say, the urban boundary sort of includes suburban areas as well.
It does.
Yeah, so we're
Urban
making sure
is
that-
just a means to determine that it interferes with housing. And within the code itself, if shooting is going on within 150 yards of a house, there can be objections to that and the shooting cease. This shooting is beyond 150 yards of the houses. These are very big lots out there.
Great. So this will allow us to, if it's passed, to clamp down on people who are shooting in suburban neighborhoods, essentially.
Correct. Really, the geographic boundary affects 9 houses and some vacant area up by Croom Road.
Mr. Hucker?
I think Mr. Zions has said it all, but colleagues, I want to assure you, I think this is a very wise and prudent update of the urban boundaries, and I'm grateful to the county executive for suggesting it. Thank you.
Very good. All right, well, that bill is introduced. And our next is expedited Bill 3918, Domestic Violence Council Membership Amendments. And the lead sponsor is Councilmember Katz. The public hearing is scheduled for December 4th at 1:30. Mr. Katz.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. This actually changes the Domestic Violence Coordinating Council from 17 members to 19 members. This body actually meets every other month. And so this would add 2 representatives from non-governmental domestic violence service or advocacy organizations which serve with the county residents. It changes the requirements for the student members so that he or she does not have to be a junior or a senior, and but must be a high school student who resides in the county when appointed. Because it meets every other month and because of the timing of when you actually advertise and get someone, by the time someone gets on board, many times they almost have graduated. So that was also part of the concern. And then it changes the term of office for the chair and the vice chair. I'm actually going out as the chair after next meeting. But it'll change it from a 1-year term to a 2-year term. There again, it meets every month. So this helps out on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Katz. Council Vice President Navarro?
Please add me as a co-sponsor.
All right, noted. And that concludes our introduction of bills. Now we'll move to call bills for final reading. Our first is Bill 3418, Human Rights and Civil Liberties, County Minimum Wage Definitions Employer. The HHS Committee has recommended enactment. Mr. Leventhal.
Thank you. The HHS Committee met on November 1st, and the vote was unanimous among those present to report this bill favorably to the full council. It adjusts the size of the workplace that is subject to the minimum wage to include workplaces with just 1 employee. This will primarily benefit domestic workers who certainly deserve to earn a minimum wage for their labor.
Thank you. Appreciate your review with the committee. Any comments here? All right. Well, I think you stated it succinctly. There have been reports of individuals who have been employed, and the State Department has been involved in, their mandate was to pay the minimum wage, and so they found that that was not what we had intended, and by fixing that program, those workers will now be eligible for the minimum wage that we actually intended when we passed our county legislation. And all those, nope, it's a roll call. So, yes.
Mr. Elrich? Yes. Mr. Elrich votes yes. Mr. Hucker?
Yes.
Mr. Hucker votes yes. Mr. Rice?
Yes.
Mr. Rice votes yes. Mr. Berliner?
Yes.
Mr. Berliner votes yes. Mr. Leventhal?
Yes.
Mr. Leventhal votes yes. Ms. Florine?
Yes.
Ms. Florine votes yes. Mr. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Katz votes yes. Ms. Navarro?
Yes.
Ms. Navarro votes yes. Mr. Reamer?
Yes, and that is unanimous. And now we'll turn to Bill 3318, Environmental Sustainability, CPACE, Property Tax Surcharge. Mr. Berliner.
Thank you, Council President. Colleagues, as you know, we declared a climate emergency in Montgomery County, and one of the biggest challenges we have is in our buildings, our existing buildings, retrofitting our existing buildings. The program that has the most promise to do that was and is our CPACE program, our Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy Program that costs our county virtually nothing. It simply creates a context in which private lenders are able to bring about great energy savings and renewable energy at no cost to the county, but are able to do so because they are able to get loans that are secured through the county's property taxes. That is what makes the program work. Our county, unfortunately, was the only county in the country to not allow the surcharge to go on the taxes until after the building was built. What that meant was property owners had to go out and get bridge financing. The people that have worked in this program and created 12, I believe, commercial PACE program, buildings in our county have said, we're done with this. It's too complicated. It's too hard, and we're going to stop doing it. So we introduced legislation to fix that. And we're all of one mind with respect to that. Our finance people, however, have a different point of view. They would like the program, but they now have asked us to put in a provision that quite frankly is a poison pill. It says, if you do this, what we want to do is if the project does not go forward, we want the right to take it off the property tax rolls. If we do that, the designated lender for our county has said, we're done. The program's over. So we say to ourselves, well, what is the risk? What is the risk that we're running here? Not a single property in the United States of America under the Commercial PACE program, $700 million worth, has gone to a property tax sale. So we have a hypothetical problem that has never actually occurred. And if we adopt the county executive and finance's recommendation, we will kill this program. Okay? It is really that simple. So our staff has looked at this. The lenders, the environmental community have all looked at this and said, this program is the most important program we have in the county to help people retrofit their existing buildings. And even though we started first, now Baltimore County is about to surpass us because our program is so hard to deal with, which I know our next county executive is going to make lots of changes so that our county is not so hard to deal with. But this is one where, honest to goodness, we have to get this right from now on. So the bill before us does that. We are not recommending, nor is our staff recommending, that we take the county executive's poison pill amendment, which would kill the program for a hypothetical issue.
All right.
Other than that, I don't have strong feelings on the matter.
Okay. Mr. Drummer, Ms. Mile, anything you'd like to?
No, Councilmember Berliner summarized the issues well.
Nancy Florine.
Thank you. I wasn't able to attend the committee meeting the other day, so I just wanted, if the chair could clarify this. So you would apply for this financing when you determined you were going to do the energy efficiency program. And is that the moment of project approval? What is the moment of project approval? Where this would go in the tax bill?
I believe it would go on it would be able to, the loan would be able to recover within 30 days after the agreement, the financing. Does that remind me?
I mean, people pay their taxes once or twice a year, right? So that's how it would operate?
Well, it would operate.
We got some amendments from you guys that we adopted in this bill with respect to the timing.
Right. The timing of the confirmation of the surcharge would occur at the time that the loan application is executed by all parties.
So you get the
The,
loan.
the surcharge, so that's the point in time in which the county agrees to place the surcharge on the tax bill. The timing as far as when it actually is going to appear in the tax bill, those appear every year with the annual tax bill on
Right,
July
right.
1st.
So
that's
you
when
basically pay it once, the surcharge.
You pay the surcharge every year, you
Yeah,
are
okay.
repaying
So
your
usual
loan over
mortgages and
time.
so forth, you pay it
Typically a
every month.
20-year term, so it'll appear on the tax
So
bill.
it's once a year, or twice if you pay twice. And what I didn't understand was the comment, if this does not occur. So if it does not occur, are you suggesting that we would continue to collect, I mean, we couldn't collect anything if it wasn't happening?
Yes, right. So under current law, the project must be completed before there is an acknowledgement and a confirmation of the surcharge appearing in the tax bill.
Well, the proposed,
proposed
it's been
change-
changed, so it,
Proposed change, that would, the law would require that the surcharge appear in the tax bill whether or not a project is completed.
so if the project is not completed, the property owner has to pay. The county isn't a party to whatever the financing agreement is, right? So if I'm just confused about what the problem is. Because it's just a collection device. But if we're not agreeing to any obligation here, so I'm not sure what the county's exposure is. I mean, you'd have a bit, something that doesn't get paid because presumably the property owner said, well, things didn't work out, so this surcharge here is no longer applicable.
The county executive raised his two concerns in the letter that he sent to the council. The two concerns being that in the
Yeah,
event of a
I'm asking for an answer to my question, not your statement. I'm just trying to understand how what the problem is in if the county is obligated. It's not, if it doesn't get paid something, we don't really care, do we? If they don't pay for that amount of the lien?
Yeah, that's the concern. If there's a delinquency, if there's
Well-
if there's a non-payment, it could go to tax sale, and the concern.
But would we apply it? We would, presumably when we collect money from people, we would apply it to our costs first, so whatever the property tax amount was, right?
So the concern that the executive has articulated is that it runs the risk, if it goes to tax sale,
Yeah,
then they batch the sales, and then it would be less likely that someone would want to purchase those liens. That's the risk that's been articulated.
Yeah, but why would we go, presumably, okay, say I'm financing my building, okay, and my tax bill is, of course, $100. And now I've entered to this agreement with somebody to put solar or whatever all over it. So now it's $125, my tax bill. And then something goes amiss, and I decide not to do the solar tax panels or whatever they are. So I say to myself, well, I'm only going to give Montgomery County $100 because I'm not doing the solar panels. So what's the problem? Why do we care?
If I'm understanding your question correctly, Ms. Florine, the problem is that at the time that the property owner is making a payment, whether they make a partial payment or no payment at all, with respect to that payment being received by the county is applying that payment to the tax bill.
Yeah.
On a proportionate basis. So
Why?
Because that's how the county does it.
Well, why doesn't the county do it according to its primary costs, and then this is like the last thing it applies?
It appears on the tax bill as any other line item.
Well, that seems to me to be an internal mathematical adjustment that you could fix if that occurred.
I don't believe that's the case.
Well, you're really smart people. I look forward to it getting addressed in the
I think
future. Okay, now I understand your frustration. Thank you.
Okay, just a comment here. No one has made a motion to
It's before the committee.
bring any additional change, right? So what's before the committee does not include the issue of some controversy. Mr. Katz.
Yeah, thank you. Just, and it was murky before, it's even murkier now, but if it goes to tax sale, I mean, if someone doesn't pay all of their taxes, I would assume that goes to tax sale, right?
That's correct.
So if they only paid, in Ms. Florine's example, if they only paid $100 and decided that they didn't need to pay the 20, then their property would go to tax sale, and someone could buy their property for the tax sale of that $20.
That's correct.
So I don't see how the county loses.
Well, the concern is, as we try to explain, that the nature of the surcharge is such a significant share of the total tax bill compared to the other charges, it makes it less desirable to a potential bidder to bid on the liens by virtue of the fact of how we go through our tax sale process. We batch these liens together in groups of about 50 or so. And the concern is that that delinquency on that particular tax account with the surcharge on it would make it less attractive.
Okay,
to be able
so
to sell the
you
liens
may
on
be
all.
right about that, but that is a risk that seems small relative to the potential benefit of having a CPACE program. I think,
Why wouldn't you buy it for $20 when you went ahead to buy it for $120?
And if I could, colleagues, not a single property in the United States of America that has done, I know, has gone to tax sale for this reason. Not a single one. This is a hypothetical problem that if we were to implement it, our designated lender says they're done. Program is over.
okay. Mr. Hucker.
I think everything's been said, but obviously, those of us who are here next year and in future years, if we have a lot of properties that go to tax sale, I think we'll revisit this issue.
Right.
Sounds good. Okay, very good. And this is a roll call vote.
Mr. Elrich? Yes. Mr. Elrich votes yes. Mr. Hucker? Mr. Hucker votes yes. Mr. Rice? Yes. Mr. Rice votes yes. Mr. Berlin? Yes. Mr. Berlin votes yes. Mr. Leventhal?
Yes.
Mr. Leventhal votes yes. Ms. Florine? Yes. Ms. Florine votes yes. Mr. Katz? Yes. Mr. Katz votes yes. Ms. Navarro?
Yes.
Ms. Navarro votes yes. Mr. Reamer?
Yes, and that is unanimous. All right. And we're going to break now for recess, and we will reconvene at 1 o'clock to continue our agenda. Hopefully downstairs in the 3rd floor. We'll let you know. Thank you. Well, this was all a ruse. We have a lot of items we wanted to talk to you about, but this is the only way to get you here. So,
Well, I didn't agree to them.
Mr. County Executive, thank you for spending some time with us this afternoon. I really appreciate the work that you've done over many years. And as I was reflecting upon the moment of transition that we're in, it occurred to me that I'm not alone in thinking that a lot of the work that I've done as a council member was done in partnership with you in your work as county executive, and there are others here whose work with you precedes their time in the county council, their roles in the community, going back many years, and you were a council member for many years, many terms, and probably in this very room presided over the council. And so it would be fitting for us as a council to acknowledge your work as a council member and as individuals, perhaps to share some reflections about work that we've done together. I know that as a council member, I have been a better council member thanks to work that you have embraced, that I've worked on, that your example, your guidance, your leadership has strengthened so much in this county. And so we have prepared a proclamation for you, and I know that you probably haven't had anyone give you a proclamation at this moment in time, and so you've probably got a spot reserved. And we have a frame of legislation that you passed, the Fair Housing Act that you passed a number of years ago, which continues to carry forward as one of the most important policy initiatives the County Council ever adopted. And I just wanted to share a moment, and I'll ask if there are a few of my colleagues, we don't necessarily have time for each, but there's a few who would care to join me in sharing a reflection. In my work at the council, I have taken on the role of being the digital government lead. And what that meant, I wasn't quite sure, but Roger agreed to give me that title, and I set about trying to do something with it. And one of the first acts that I pursued was the Open Data Act. And in the process of formulating the Open Data Act, I had to decide, did I want to try to work with the executive branch, work with you, or to try to, work around or somehow, parallel to you? And I did a little research on your record with technology, and I learned that you'd have been an early adopter. You were the first council member I heard to bring a mimeograph machine into your office, and you insisted that the council should have a telegraph office for the press. No, but in all seriousness, you embraced the Open Data Act, and your team that you brought together, that you built, has established data as one of the signature technology initiatives of Montgomery County government. And the work that we do is recognized by local governments all across the country as at the cutting edge. And I hear from residents all the time that they are getting benefits, accessing the sets, analyzing information, and strengthening their voices in the process, thanks to the Open Data Initiative that you embraced and have succeeded with far beyond what I even understood was possible. And I really wanted to commend you for that, because it says a lot about your style, that whether or not that was something that you had on your agenda as what you wanted to do with data, I don't know. You did create the 311 system. You're at the cutting edge of management and strategy, management strategy, but at the same time, a council member brought an initiative forward, and you made it happen and brought it to the next level. And I really thank you for that. I think for the county executive to be a skillful collaborator is one of the most important qualities as a council member, because you get to work with the county executive to achieve the goals that you were elected to achieve. And so I just wanted to express my appreciation to you for that spirit. And similarly, the bike infrastructure. I don't know that anyone's ever seen you whipping by on 355 and with a helmet on, on a bike, but that hasn't slowed you down from aggressively pursuing the cutting-edge bike infrastructure that is now cropping up all around this county, and being part of the change in this county to becoming one of the recognized suburban communities embracing the future of alternative modes of transportation. So I just wanted to, again, thank you for being the kind of executive that you are, to work closely with many council members on different initiatives, to work in partnership in a way that I think has always been in the spirit of the charter. And, that has been has brought so much to our community. And it's a bittersweet moment, obviously, to say farewell, as we will soon say. We're not saying that today. We're commemorating your tremendous work. But, thank you for everything that you've done. I really appreciate it. And if any of my colleagues would like to make an observation, and then I will go up to the mic and present the. Okay. Well, I didn't want to put everyone on the spot. This isn't a moment where you must praise our our chairman. But if you would like to, I guess that's exactly the way it goes, isn't it? Mr. Leventhal. I'll start. Well, actually, I'm sorry. Nancy Navarro, Council Vice President.
Nancy Fluff Navarro.
Did I
say that?
Yeah, that's okay.
It's a nice name.
Yeah, it's a good combination. So, Mr. Leggett, let me start by saying that, I'm always reminded that leaders really are tested when times are tough. It's very easy to proclaim to be a great leader when things are great. And so for me, having joined the council at a time when I was so excited about expanding programs and adding to things and being greeted with the Great Recession was baptism by fire. And I really do want to express my admiration and appreciation for how you very quickly responded to this big challenge and worked so collaboratively with us to make sure that we not only looked at low-hanging fruit and tried to put Band-Aid fixes, but really looked at structural changes, which really have led us to the point that we are today. And it has not been easy. So I would say that that's my first recollection of what it meant to be, a rookie council member under working in partnership with you. So I really do appreciate and admire that. The way I think also that you lead our AAA bond rating conversations every time we go to New York. I've also appreciated, because you're very good at making sure that you point to the great things we're doing and where the challenges are. And that, I think, it's something that everybody needs to emulate, because it's not always rosy, but it's great to have a plan. And so a lot of people perhaps don't get to see that, but it's something that I have appreciated. I do want to let you know that I did not berate you when it came to Wheaton. I clearly just wanted to express my passion around the fact that we needed to get something going, but really appreciate also that support, the support that you have given to doing something there, and also your extraordinary staff that has led the way in that. And I will close by saying, and of course there's so many other things, I mean, the Children Opportunity Fund, so many things, but the one thing that I found very interesting is that you invited me to speak once with Hispanic Heritage Month to county employees, and I spoke about one of our dishes in Venezuela, hallacas, which is something that we eat in December, and I explained the history and how it came to be with, something to the effect of, when slavery was, was there in Venezuela, people just kind of took whatever was left over and made this tamale, and it's kind of like our history. And you came up and you said that, wow, that was really incredible and very complicated, but for you, what reminds you of comfort food was Popeyes. And I thought that was really funny, and I thought it was just a joke, except that then I realized that Claudia Canales, your administrator, I believe they had a little farewell for you, and they gave you a whole bunch of Popeye, memorabilia. So actually it was real and true, and so I will never forget that there is that connection between, the southern Louisiana food and Venezuela traditional food. And I do hope that you do stay involved in some level, because I think that we will continue to need, your expertise and your advice here and there. And lastly, just want to thank you for having assembled such an amazing administration, because you have some incredible people. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Leventhal.
Well, I just came from packing up plaques and mementos from my office, and this is a time for a lot of memories. And my memories of you, I go back 32 years. In your first campaign, I was just a couple years out of college. I had a full head of hair. You had a full head of hair. And I didn't know you, but I was working on a campaign for state senate in Silver Spring, and some of the volunteers who were very excited about the candidate I was working for were not supporters of yours. And it's hard now, 32 years later, to remember how groundbreaking it was in a county which was much, much less diverse, much, much less diverse. And we are confronted every day now with the fact that racism persists in a big way, but it's easy to forget in the bubble that we live in what an extraordinary challenge you took on to run countywide in a climate that was maybe not so different than the climate that we see in other parts of the county, but was very different than the Montgomery County we appreciate today. And so some very terrible things were said about you as a candidate, not you as a person, but the racism that you must have had to encounter in your courage and bravery in taking that on is really very, very striking to me. And then over the years, as I got more involved in the Democratic Party, you set the standard. I used to call you the hardest working man in show business because you were always present in the community. I would see you as a party activist before I ran for office, just at community meetings, civic gatherings, Democratic Party gatherings, and you were among the most admired and beloved of the figures as a council member. And then when you made the announcement that you would not run for a fifth term in 2002, I had the opportunity to run because you vacated that seat. And that obviously made a major impact on my life and my career, and you offered me a lot of advice and help as a candidate and throughout my 16 years as a council member, serving twice as council president. Many times I would get a phone call, and it was Professor Leggett on the other end offering me a lesson plan. Whether or not I had enrolled in the course, I was always grateful. I was always appreciative of the advice. And then when you, of course, decided to retire and the office of county executive became vacant, and I ran for that too. And I've said since the election, I think the only thing worse than losing for county executive might have been winning. And I wish every success and good wish to my friend Mark Elrich. But as I mounted that campaign, it made me appreciate you and your many gifts even more. The difficulty of balancing the demands of constituents, demands that are often 180 degrees different from each other, and yet you, I think, more than anyone else in county politics, have been able to leave everyone feeling like they'd been heard, and everyone feeling good about the way you handled them and their concern, because it just absolutely is not possible to satisfy 100% of the constituents, but you always maintained great grace and an even tone, and even when the demands were unrealistic, which sometimes they are, you always managed to handle them so deftly and in such a gentlemanly manner. So I know that all of us have learned a great deal from your example, and I join my colleagues in expressing our great admiration and affection for you.
George, that's a great segue. That's why I ran too in 2002. Mr. Leggett was retiring, and we were both successful. Well, you've heard this before, but I was going to, because I knew everyone was going to say more or less the same wonderful thing. And you've heard this, and I think Mr. Katz has heard this. But I did not bring my rap band with me today. But I am going to do my salute that I did to you a few months ago. Everybody, ready? Executive Ike Leggett, he's the man who really gets it. Number 7 out of 12, not a minute to himself. Left Louisiana for Montgomery, so shining but less summery, to make this new community an amazing place for unity. With an ear for all the people and the faiths and the religions that will fit beneath the steeple or mosque or yurt or shul, I'll teach like Ike to live the golden rule. Executive Ike Leggett, he's the man who really gets it. And let's see if we don't lose our power here. Grow the table, don't grow fences. Young and old, let's use our senses. In Montgomery, achieve your fate, participate, walk straight, don't wait. Find brotherhood, not hate. Together, you know you can be great. He told our long-term residents, we're grateful for your evidence, your precedence, your excellence, your eloquence and elegance. For Montgomery's glory is the real American story. Executive Ike Leggett, he's the man who really gets it. From service in Vietnam into the White House with aplomb, to teach the lad Howard, Ike flourished and he flowered, never shied from any challenge. He can teach, inspire, manage, make decisions truly balanced. He listens, then he leads to keep this golden county moving at the proper speeds. Executive Ike Leggett, he's a man who really gets it. Going forward with due care, always fiscally aware. Through cutbacks and through furloughs and even restorations, no ponderous orations, he lays foundations, winning Wall Street salutations and citizen ovations. On county council broke precedent, consecutive terms as president, whether compromise or will unbent, from Ike, we learn the rule, now taught in every school, when you have the votes, stop talking. Without them, start your balking, sleepwalking, stalking, slow walking, crawl into any nearby hole, just so long as you make sure that they never call the roll. Executive Ike Leggett, he's a man who really gets it. Never haunted, never daunted, Ike's a man who finds solutions, top staff, builds institutions, writes new circumlocutions. Executive Ike Leggett, he's a man who really gets it. A man who's on a mission to diversify commissions that reflect us all, with no omission. Brown and yellow, black and white, old and mellow, young and bright, all come to Montgomery. With Ike, there's no blustering, no drudgery, no thuggery, only constant new discovery of strength to make things right. He's led the way to make the East, not least, but increased, its powers released, and Viva White Oak reborn, now awoke with dreams in place to set the pace as the space for research, jobs, and growth. To develop the economy would take some more autonomy, so privatize, prioritize, then customize, and energize, and maximize, and synthesize. So much for education, for housing more affordable. His accomplishments abound, resound, compound, and confound, which leads to such renown. But at the end of the day, what can we say? That he brings the ability, the stability, the humility. He speaks with civility, then acts with agility, flexibility, dedication, and utility. That he finds new possibilities with surprising facility, only rare irascibility, which makes the final probability with total dependability, acts versatility and sustainability through 7 countywide elections. Executive Ike Liggett, he's a man who really gets it. Mr. Zients had helped a little bit with that, too.
Well, it's tough to follow the play Hamilton, I can tell you, but yeah, if I'd have known that, I could have written a poem. Hi, diddle, diddle, something. But first off, I sincerely want to thank you for your leadership and for being a mentor to me personally and for being a friend. You've really made a tough job appear to be easy, and that in itself is not easy. I think about the people that served before you, all of whom served with distinction as a county executive. And I don't believe that anyone could ever attend as many events as you and Catherine have. It's just unbelievable. And you've truly made an impact on so many from every walk of life, every age, and from every background. People have said, we could each do just a few things that we remember quickly, but the mental health courts, what a difference it's made in people's lives, both from a circuit and a district court level. It truly has made a remarkable difference. I've gone to their graduations, and people are starting to see that there's a path for them as well. And in some of our discussions, you've clearly pointed out various concerns and, as George said, given guidance on how you would suggest they be solved. And I sure hope you'll continue to do that, not just for me, but for all of us. And I've had some amusing discussions with you as well. I remember, I guess it was last year or the year before, I was actually watching the Silver Spring Parade on television. And the announcer mentioned that you have a beautiful singing voice. And I was at an event and sat at the same table as some of your family members, maybe a couple days later. And of course, being Mr. Congeniality, I figured I'd bring up this great knowledge that I had about you. And I said, I never realized that Ike has such a great singing voice. And both your family members says his voice is terrible. He does not have a great singing voice. And so, of course, I couldn't wait to walk over to the table where you were to give you this new information. And you did agree with me very quickly that your next career is not going to be on that circuit. But you and Catherine are truly remarkable people. You've served us all in a remarkable way. And I thank you for your service, and I know all of us do, have gained so much from your knowledge and from your help. And quite candidly, I hope you do not enjoy retirement. I hope that you keep helping us, because I know I'm going to keep calling on you. Thank you very much for all that you do.
Mr. County Executive, there's a Jewish proverb that says, I ask not for a lighter burden, but for broader shoulders. From your earliest days to your service to our community, you have carried so much, and you have done so with such grace, with such humility, and has been said by others with such dignity. And that, to me, is what's most important. There are many legislative accomplishments that all of us can point to in working with you and the things that you have done. But to me, what has always set you apart is how you've done them. And so our community has gone through the most incredible demographic changes and transitions of almost any community anywhere. And the way you have stood up for our county's values of inclusion and mutual respect and human dignity has been really among the hallmarks of your tenure. And without that, you've seen what happens in other places with other officials. with other so-called leaders. But your leadership in that regard has been just so exemplary, and we are in your debt for that among so many things. So when I think of you, I think of that saying that may your life be a blessing. Ike Leggett, you have been a blessing to our community, and we thank you for that.
So, Mr. County Executive, let me just start by saying, not about what you've done for me, but what you've done for people like me. Growing up here in this county, it's incredibly important to be able to see in the various aspects of careers a person who holds themselves to the highest level so that you can exemplify them. And so it's one of those things where, as a young man who grew up in Montgomery County and seeing politics, you were always the shining example because there was only one. There was only one African American who we had in a high leadership position here in Montgomery County and, quite frankly, here in the state of Maryland. There are a lot of scandals and all kinds of things that confounded a lot of elected officials throughout the state of Maryland. And you, sir, are one who you've heard from my colleagues have always held yourself to the highest of those standards, and that means a lot. It means a lot for a young man who thinks about service to their community, who thinks about the things that they want to do to continue to serve and make the lives for other people better. And again, I'm not talking about me, I'm talking about young people who I talk to that are in school and talk about you and talk about the impact that you have on them. These aren't people who are playing inside baseball, who know about politics, who know about what it is and the sacrifices you make. What they know is that they see a black man who's doing great things for people in their community. And that means so much today in today's age, where we continue to see stories that are exactly the opposite. You are the shining example of what we all aspire to have in our community. People of all races and creeds and religions who are dedicated to serving their fellow man. And there are no limitations based on who you are or what you look like to make sure that those things happen. You defy the very stereotypes that you've heard some of my other colleagues say that unfortunately continue to exist. That is why your service is so important. Not just about the great things you've done here in Montgomery, but about the great things that you do in terms of opening up the possibility for so many behind you. I stand as one of those, as one of many, who now see the role that you have played and the things that you have done for our community and understand that that's something that we all can aspire to do and be. So I thank you for that, sir.
I haven't heard anything I disagree with yet. Mr. Leggett, thanks for making the time to come over. I worry that everything's been said, but not everybody's had a chance to say it yet. But I do want to say also, this has been great to listen to, but also how much I enjoyed the well-deserved tributes to you at the Women's Democratic Club and at Strathmore. And I think a lot of people in the audience learned, who may have only known you for the last few years, learned an awful lot about your contributions to the county over so many decades at those events. All of us appreciate the steady leadership that you showed during the Great Recession. It's not easy to maintain our vital services and a AAA bond rating at the same time. That's no easy feat, and you managed to do it. And it affects all of us even today because it's made subsequent budgets and subsequent CIPs so much easier. The hard choices that you had to make then. None of us run for office hoping to lead in those difficult times when you have to make very difficult choices, but you managed to carry us through that period with a lot of grace and wisdom. And in particular, I'm grateful for your emphasis on infrastructure. When you knew there were great constraints on our operating budget and you knew there were still a lot of unmet needs in the county and that you could spur economic development, create jobs, and address unmet needs by investing in our capital budget, the folks, especially in my district, but all across the county, are really grateful for projects that you led on, like the Silver Spring Library and our new fire station, our 3rd District Police Station, the Good Hope Rec Center and the East County Rec Center, and so much affordable housing all over the county, because each one of those projects isn't just a good idea in itself. I think it sends a message to people that I hear all the time, that the county sees them and thinks of them, thinks they matter, and that their concerns matter. And that is exactly the sort of message we should be sending from Rockville. I'm also grateful as a longtime activist and a progressive on the council that you have always embraced an expansive role of county government, and that you had an ambition for Montgomery County government that I think other local leaders don't always see, that you saw a role for the county government in leading on public health initiatives, on programs to support people experiencing homelessness, integrating so many immigrants into our Montgomery County family, and so much work to close the income and the achievement gaps and the opportunity gaps between the East County and the West County, as well as all your long recognized support for arts and libraries and recreation programs. I really appreciate that that's not done just through the county government, but through your support for nonprofits. Years ago, you were very supportive of me and Progressive Maryland when we were just getting started. You've been very supportive of so many nonprofits over the years, not just through the budget, but by assigning great staff to work with them. And then, even you and Catherine going above and beyond so many times, opening up your house to the District 14 Democratic Club or the African American Democratic Club or the state delegation for social events or other events, just to make people work together better and to send a message that, while it wasn't in your job description, send a message about what was important to you personally and to Catherine personally, and I know people really appreciate that. I've greatly enjoyed working with you. I really appreciate all your advice and support over the years, and I know all of us up here will miss you greatly. Thank you.
So I want to thank you also. I mean, in the years I've known you, you've always been gracious, and at times when we've disagreed, you've never been disagreeable. And we've always been able to have good, intelligent discussions about things. And at the end, whether we agreed or not, we left friends and we continued to work with each other. And that meant a lot, because not everybody plays that way. And I really appreciated that. I appreciated your expertise with snow, and I only say that because they're projecting another possible 28 inches of extra snow. I was hoping it would all fall by December 3rd, because I don't want to learn on the job in my first term, so I thought maybe I'd get a little refresher if it came early. We may get some tomorrow morning. Yes, 1 inch. But I would just be in light about that. Anyway, I think, the things that stick out for me were your early recognition of the African American recreation centers that have been allowed to fall into absolute disrepair, and your very firm statement that we were going to fix these and we were going to take care of these. And I know how much it meant to the African American community, who had suffered relatively silently while they watched other things go on around the county, and their systems continued to deteriorate. And I really, really appreciated your leadership on that. Your leadership during the recession, I think, was just critically important for the long-term health of the county. And I think you saw something that not everybody saw, which is that this was going to be deep and it was going to be, persistent. And this wasn't going to be over in 2 years, so we just couldn't go about our business and think 2 years later we'd all be fine. You set us on a path of really difficult decisions that when things didn't get better in 2 years, we were able to manage them, and manage them better than most other jurisdictions, I think, were able to do it. And I don't think many of the other people who would have sat in your seat would have taken that view. So I'm really glad that you were there, and I think you set us up for a better future. I appreciated your signature on 2 minimum wage bills, and on the tenants' rights legislation, and on 10 Mile Creek, and on the bus rapid transit, because all those things can be transformative for the county. And you work to get to places on all of them that we could live with, and I think are going to move this county forward. And I think as we move, and some of these things, like the minimum wage gets fully implemented and bus rapid transit becomes more of a reality, they're going to be transformative for people in this county, and I appreciate your leadership and vision on all that stuff. And lastly, I thank you for your sartorial advice. I don't know if you remember, but it was early in the campaign, and I was talking to you, and you leaned over to me and you said, "You don't always have to wear a tie, but you have to wear a jacket." And so I've done my best wherever I show up, at least to have a jacket on. And I'm pleasantly surprised sometimes when I'm overdressed more than you, which happens rarely, but at least I feel I'm getting too serious about this. I do appreciate what you did and your help and, support and guidance over all these years. And I hope you're around to come and visit and say, "Hey, have you thought about this?" Because we're going to face challenges, and experience and knowledge have a place and a role, and you have a lot of that. And I'll be more than happy to listen to you in the future. Thank you.
Let me say it is somewhat ironic that you're giving me all of these great praises at a time when I just lost Amazon. It's a bittersweet pill today because I had great hope and expectation that we would in fact get it up right up until the very end. A lot of the praises, I think, are reflective of the team that I have around me and the person who's helped implement, helped guide me and support me. Tim Feinstein. Tim is here somewhere. Where's Tim? Tim, much of what all of you described was not possible without your support, the partnership. Not only your direct involvement and participation, but also from your staff, from Steve, Glenn, Marlene, and so many other people around who helped to make all of those things you described possible. I'll just say a couple of things. I want to also thank you for your trust. And let me explain what I mean by that. There are a couple of times when I made some very, very serious decisions. And I went out on a limb with the expectation and belief that you would support me. The decision as it relates to the Purple Line. A call late at night from the Secretary of Transportation, laying out a plan and deal which I had to respond within a very short period of time, calculating what was at stake for the county, the cost to the county, what it required us to do in order to ensure that Prince George's County was on board. I made a decision to say yes, and the only person I think that I called after the decision was Roger to say, "Roger, I've gone out on a limb, and this is what I've decided to do. I need you and your colleagues to back me in this decision, because if we don't do it now, I'm not sure that we can pull this back. And so trust me that this is the right thing to do." And you said yes, and you said, "I believe we get the council aboard." Despite losing Amazon, when we put together a proposal that all of you did not know all the details and precise points of that discussion, you trusted me and my team to do the right thing. I appreciate that. There have been so many occasions, going back many years ago, when I made a very hard decision related to the WSSC project and getting the land to, in fact, provide us with the impetus to go forward from Viva White Oak. And come back later on after that with Maryland and say, "Maryland, this is the deal that I've made. I cannot go back on it. You have to support this and accept it." That's the trust that you placed in me. And there have been so many occasions when I made decisions believing that I was making a decision on the behalf of this county, for which you have trusted me to ensure. I want to leave you with one last comment, is that there are an awful lot of big things that you've just described, an awful lot of things that we've done as it relates to a $5.7 billion budget. We make big decisions in this county. Montgomery County, in terms of its budget, the number of people, is probably larger than 6 or 7 states. And so they're not small matters that we make decisions about, but it is the small matters that I think reflects your courage, your leadership, and your ability. I recall after my first 4 years on the county council many years ago, I was prepared to just leave. So many hearings, trying to go to all the things that you've just described, still the residual effects of racism and so forth, still affecting the county, the leadership and everything else. And I'm saying I've got a wonderful job at Howard University. I'm producing students all over the place. Why do I have to do this? And I was leaning very heavily to not coming back to run again. But a lady approached me and she described the problem that she had. And she said to me that her husband had recently died and that she had inquired about his benefits to the county. They had recently adopted a kid from Thailand or China or somewhere. And she had a part-time job only making about $10,000 a year. And when she inquired about the benefits from the county, she realized that all the benefits were in the name of a first wife, a wife that she didn't know anything about, and it was surprising to her. And so she came to me with a problem. She contacted the first wife, and the first wife said, well, I haven't seen him in 20-some years. He maybe just forgot to change your name on the papers and remove my name. And the county said, well, nothing we can do about this. And so she explained this to me right at this crucial time, and I was thinking about not running for re-election. And I said, well, you know, we need to correct this. And I provided a legislation which the county executive, county council, my colleagues on the council said, oh, you can't go back and correct this. It goes back 20-some years. The county executive this time was against it. The head of personnel at that time was against it. Everybody was against it. But I said, I'm going to introduce this. I have to correct this wrong. And the day we were to vote, in this very same room, ironically, sitting right here, the lady shows up with herself, a family, and the little kid. And I am not certain what my colleagues on the council will do. And I'm saying to myself, this could be a major, major embarrassment. This has a big impact on her and her family. This is one person, but it has a huge impact. And as we started to debate this, and ultimately started to vote, one by one, all 9 members of the council voted yes. And the lady sitting right here looked at me with the baby in her arms, and she started crying. And I said to myself right then, this is why I am here. This small matter impacting this one single person for which I had the ability to do something about, and I did. I immediately left this chamber, went to the Board of Elections, and signed up to run again. And I've been running ever since. I say that because just recently, this council, on a disability retirement affecting one person, a bus driver here in Montgomery County, one person who was disabled and his benefits ended. It took us 5 months to correct, but ultimately provided legislation that provided relief to this one person that affected probably 2 or 3 others. And we spent a great deal of time making sure we got it right. I say that because in essence, this is the job. When you make decisions about the school system, there are boards of education, there are teachers' unions, there are support unions, there's a whole system that protects that. But this was one person. If we ever fail to recognize that in the job and responsibilities, then we've missed the essence of what legislation and leadership about. If you get the small things right, you would ultimately get the big things right as well. And so that's the word that I'll leave with you. You've done that admirably, and I'm sure that you will continue to do it in the future. Thank you.
All right. First item we have for your commemorative wall is a framed copy of legislation that you authored. I know it'll be very familiar to you, but seems appropriate coming from the county council. So thank you. This is your bill 1887. 87 is the year, I believe, then it was passed. Is that right? It was a fair housing law, landmark law. And we have a proclamation, which we've helpfully framed for you as well, that I'll read, and then we'll take a photograph together. Whereas in November 2006, Isaiah Leggett was elected to his first 4-year term as Montgomery County Executive. and is the first African-American leader to be elected to this public office, and the county residents benefited from his leadership for the last 12 years. And whereas, as county executive, Leggett has built a record of public service marked by conviction to principle, leadership, and a willingness to make hard choices, and he is successfully focused on making sure that residents from every part of our ever more diverse Montgomery County have a seat at the table and a voice in the decisions that affect their lives. And whereas, as skillful collaborator, Leggett embraced his colleagues on the county council and partnered with them on countless initiatives in every area of policymaking, including transportation, housing, economic development, energy and the environment, youth development, public safety, and more. And whereas, during his tenure as county executive, the county has won $476 million in state money for county school construction, and the county has increased capital funding for the Montgomery County Public Schools by nearly 50%, which has added 21,043 seats. That is 6 new schools, 44 school additions, and 27 renovations or expansions, and 12 gym renovations. And whereas, working in partnership with the County Council, Leggett has built a foundation for a brighter future by reinventing economic development and workforce development, supporting MCPS and Montgomery College with record investments, backing the Purple Line, WMATA, enhanced bus service and bike infrastructure, revitalizing areas of the county such as White Flint and Wheaton, expanding housing opportunities and affordable housing programs, and relocating county services to make land available to advance a smart growth vision. And whereas County Executive Leggett is also known as an adept campaigner, winning election to the County Council, serving 4 terms as an at-large council member before winning the County Executive's office in 2010, 2014. And whereas he served as a captain in the United States Army, and his tour of duty in the Vietnam War earned him the Bronze Star Medal, the Vietnam Service Medal, and the Vietnam Campaign Medal. And whereas County Executive Leggett holds a Bachelor of Arts from Southern University, a Master of Arts and a Juris Doctorate from Howard University, and a Master of Laws from George Washington University. Now therefore be it resolved that the County Council of Montgomery County hereby honors County Executive Isaiah Leggett today in November 2018. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Mr. County Executive. The sunset is beckoning. All right. And I meant to do this before that, but I didn't get a chance. I wanted to congratulate Councilmember Mark Elrich on his victory in the November election. And we are looking forward to serving with you in your capacity as County Executive of Montgomery County.
All right.
I think Mr. Leggett shows that service as a council member is fine preparation for being a county executive. And you've certainly got that in great quantities. Yes, many years. Very good. And now we will turn to an important discussion about pedestrian and traffic safety along state highways. And we will have joining us Mr. Greg Slater from the State Highway Administration. Mr. Slater, welcome. And at the dais with him will be Glenn Orland, our Council Transportation Policy staffer. And here in our audience, we have Captain Tom Didone, Todd Watkins with Montgomery County Public Schools, Wade Holland at County Stat, Al Rashdi, Director of the Department of Transportation, Chris Conklin, Deputy Director at Transportation, and Christy Daphnis, Chair of our Pedestrian, Bicycle, and Traffic Safety Advisory Committee. So we will have a presentation, and then we will have discussion. I want to thank Council Vice President Navarro for the suggestion of inviting State Highways here today to engage in a very timely conversation about how we can work together more closely on making improvements to safety. This has been it's been a challenging summer, it's been a challenging fall, it's been a challenging 24 hours. I'm sad to share, as you know, we've had 7 serious incidents or pedestrian crashes in the last 24 hours even. I believe there was a pedestrian who is deceased as a result of a crash in Rockville. And not yet? Okay, we're shaking head. I read it somewhere, a headline that there was a fatality, but she's hanging on and we are holding for her. And we have a challenge on our county roads, no question, and about half of our incidents are on our county roads, and we need to take ownership of that and change how we do our many issues in order to address that. And we have a challenge on our state highways. And I really appreciate the quick response from State Highways to come here today and speak with us and work with us and have a dialogue that we can take and move forward and try to make changes. You know, half of the traffic volume in the county is on state highways, and half of the incidents are on state highways. So as everyone knows, we don't have the ability to change the design or the construction of a state highway. We rely upon state highways to understand what's happening locally and make those changes. We have influence, but we don't have control. And so we're here today to talk about how State Highways views this issue and how we can make some improvements. So I think I will ask Glenn if there's, and I will come to Council Vice President Navarro. Glenn, can you just describe anything that you want us to go and you need us to know to start the discussion, and then we'll go to Nancy.
Just a couple of words about the format of this discussion. We've set this up so that Mr. Slater can give his PowerPoint presentation. Unfortunately, the PowerPoint machine does not work in this building. So you have hard copies in front of you. We will post it on the web later today.
Okay.
And of course, the whole session is being taped and will be on later. You also have in your packet a PowerPoint presentation that was put together by Wade Holland. We're not expecting to go through that PowerPoint today, but it's there for more background information. And finally, after Greg has given his presentation, then I would hope you would have it open up to Q&A to all the people at the dais.
Perfect.
Including 1 or 2 people who can't make it to the dais because we don't have enough spaces, but I'll make room.
Great. Thank you. I'd like to ask Council Vice President Navarro to share some reflections.
Thank you, Mr. President, and really thank you to all my colleagues. I know Councilmember Rice also very quickly, especially right after the incident on Georgia Avenue with students, we also had conversations about really putting together a session such as this. I think that there is no doubt that we are all very committed and really, really interested in getting always ahead of ourselves in terms of how do we address a lot of these challenges. But it is obvious that we seem to have some particular concentration, I think, of particular challenges. It is, I think, obvious that when it comes to the safety of our students, no matter how much we, work on the safe routes to school and all of these different types of efforts, we do have to take a step back and make sure that we are addressing whatever might be out there that proves to be, a challenge and a danger to our students. I think also the fact that we are experiencing some revitalization and redevelopment projects around the county. that really, I think, lend themselves to really taking a comprehensive approach in addressing and enhancing the pedestrian safety, infrastructure, engineering, et cetera. So I really do want to first thank you, Mr. Slater, for coming, as well as our Montgomery County DOT, our school system, our police department, because everybody works greatly every day to address this. I'm personally very interested in finding ways for us to streamline the cooperation and collaboration with our state highways, because as it was described by Council President Reamer, many of these incidents are occurring on state highways, and we really do need to figure out, I think, a streamlined way to address these challenges. And moving forward, because we're in the cusp of a new administration, County Executive-elect Elrich, a new council, I think it also opens up a really good opportunity to look at our short-term, mid-term, and long-term approach here and move swiftly to address those areas that have already been identified. We have a lot of data, so I think that is really not the question. It's more about how can we work collaboratively to identify our way forward, and that's really what I'm hoping that we at least can glean some information and then work through that as well. So thank you, everybody, for coming over.
Thank you very much, Council Vice President Navarro, and I'll ask our Chair of our Transportation Committee, Mr. Berliner, any further comment?
Just very briefly, thank you for joining us today. My experience of you is that you're a good partner and will be a good partner. Our whole goal as a county in having passed the Vision Zero was to begin to change this conversation. And clearly, it isn't changing fast enough. And I will just say to you that my own experience over the years, and I think we are beginning to change, but it has been this whole mentality that cars rule and that speed rules. And the faster we can get cars through intersections, the better. This has to stop. And I'm one of these people that I see people jaywalking and I go, oh my goodness, why are you jaywalking? And then I jaywalk. I mean, I ask my colleague, how many of us have not jaywalked? And if we don't assume people will jaywalk, if we don't assume to counter that by making our roads, understand that that is what's going to happen by re-engineering them. By looking at every major road and saying, okay, people are crossing here, we need a crosswalk here. Because human nature is what it is, and if we don't address human nature, then we're fooling ourselves, and people are dying as a result. So this is a most serious conversation in which I do think the culture change, and I turn to our DOT as part of that. I think our culture is changing, but it has to accelerate now. So that was our goal when we passed Vision Zero, to come up with a new paradigm to say, okay, we're going to slow down roads in these congested areas. We're going to make it safer for all of our people. So I just hope going forward that you will be a good partner. I hope going forward that under the new county executive and our DOT, that we will be as aggressive as we can possibly be. I say to you, one of the things that has frustrated me, and then I'll conclude, is our manual on uniform traffic control, as though it were the Bible. And so we have these rules in that manual that say, oh my goodness, we cannot put in a hawk light unless 85% of the drivers are speeding. Really? That has to change. You have the discretion to do that. I fought with you guys over Whitman High School. And, we had somebody driving on River Road at 100 miles an hour. And begged you guys, call it a school zone. And you said, oh, we can't do that because it doesn't front us. It's not fronting on River Road. But you do have the discretion to do that. I ask you even today, these are the kinds of measures that we need you guys to do that recognize what's happening on our roads every day. Whether it's Georgia Avenue, River Road, Veers Mill, it's everywhere. Anyway, thank you. Thank you, Council President, for the opportunity to just say a few words.
All right, I'm not sure who is up first. Mr. Elrich?
Yeah, I want to thank Mrs. Slater for coming, and I had written a letter a while back. I'd thought it was better just sent that way than publicly. But what I asked was that we consider lowering speed limits in the urban areas to about to 25, but also use that opportunity to do some of the other traffic calming, which is narrowing it down. It's not like we're asking that you take wide swaths of the county. I mean, our urbanized areas are pretty short, even for urban areas. And to me, I used to be, I would calculate the amount of time I would save if I drove at a higher speed, and I always remembered the amount of time I would save was pretty trivial. And so I say, by the same token, the amount that people would have to slow down, the length of their trips would be really trivial, and at rush hour, no one's going that speed anyway, for the most part. So I want to be a partner with you going forward, and I hope that we take a flexible approach. I've always been able to work with your department, and I always found you just really, open to what we need to do to solve problems, and I hope we can work together, council and executive and the state and our own people, to make this a safer environment. And I think we can, and it's not a lot of big buck investments. But I would say the other side of all this is we need to do a better job in education for people, because not all these accidents are happening at crosswalks. And, I've seen people do things which I thought put them at risk that didn't show very good judgment. And we need to do a better job of making it clear the risks that people are taking. I mean, I look at people's assumptions about timing. I don't know how they can look at a car and assume they're going to get across the street safely. And if people weren't hitting their brakes really hard, some of what I've seen would have ended really badly. And I just think we need to do a better job communicating to people about the pedestrian end of pedestrian safety. Thank you.
Mr. Hucker? Oh, no. Mr. Slater.
First, thank you for having me here this afternoon. I know over the years I've worked with many of you on a variety of topics. I was sitting here thinking back about a new council member, Reamer, and I, as a new planning director, sitting in our district office talking about pedestrian safety more than 10 years ago, probably. Yeah, so I know I've talked with many of you over a variety of instances, many related back to pedestrian and bike safety across our county. And in my 22-year career, I've seen a lot of things happen. I've seen a lot of things evolve. And I'm here to kind of talk a little bit about that, but also convey that we're a very different state highway today than we were 2 years ago. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of that. As we go through this, I'm going to talk a lot about what the data is telling us, and then I'm going to tell you what we're going to do about that and what we're already doing, and tie some tangible action to that, and areas that we can partner moving forward, because I think there are some areas that we can work together. So just real quick, over the last few years, I think this worked better as a PowerPoint, but we're going to fight through some paper on this one and kind of work through. Just, it's definitely old school. Don't ever take my iPad away. But I just put one slide in there. Pedestrian safety is a big part of this. We're a very new organization when it comes to the culture that we're trying to facilitate. And really, when I talk about innovation and modernization, these are the 4 areas that I have asked the entire organization to focus on, and bringing those tools together for pedestrian safety are a big part of that. So I think we tie that back into the customer experience and how we're communicating with all of our communities and what's happening out there, and it's mobility, it's accessibility, it's mode choice, it's equity, it's everything, all of the above into one component, and we have to have that all at the table if we're going to make right choices. So just a couple of things that we've shifted over the last, I think March will be 2 years since I've been administrator, and we've shifted some things a little bit different. Everybody comes in with a little bit different perspective. We changed it. We're not a one-size-fits-all approach anymore. We used to have a very much of a one-size-fits-all approach to every single one of our roadways. It's very different. There's context there. There's communities there. They're the centerpiece of what we do and not the roadway itself. New strategies, and really taking into these areas, Councilman Berliner, it's really taking that pedestrian safety over mobility in a lot of these areas and really tackling this issue. If I look down the new tools in the toolbox, the Hawk signal is now in our MUTCD. reducing lane widths, giving us the ability to get down to 10-foot lanes in some of these urbanized areas. Reducing speed limits, very much a tool in the toolbox. Revamped PRSA program, I'm going to talk about that a little bit later as well as we break down these miles. And it's not just about the data, it's about collaboration with the community and with the people that are using it every day. We've put in more of these rectangular rapid flashing beacons. They have helped a lot in some of these urbanized areas and frankly some of the more suburban areas as well in just trying to get people's attention when there's going to be a heavy pedestrian movement in these areas. And then urban standards, about a year and a half ago, I sat down with Al and with Chairman of the Planning Board to talk about what the county had done with urban standards. So we're in the middle of developing our own and taking one piece. So we looked at what Montgomery County did, and we're trying to figure out how we can build a solution that works for everybody. So, you know, we can't have 23 different sets of standards, so we really need to have a standard that works for everybody. But urban standards is very much a tool in our toolbox now, and it wasn't there before. So we're working through a lot of these issues and making a lot of progress. The data tells a very strong story, both locally and nationally, both here in Montgomery County, both in Prince George's County and Baltimore City, all across the state. The data tells a very startling story. So nationally, pedestrian fatalities have gone up 9%. They're at the highest number since 1990. There are a lot of things there, a lot of dynamics happening. It's travel, it's economy, and one of the things that we're really trying to wrap our head around from a data perspective is when you have everybody in the world using Waze and Google Traffic, and it's sending them through neighborhoods that they're not quite used to, and you know, so you have more traffic in areas that are probably not ready for that kind of traffic, and you have people driving down roads that they're not quite used to driving down. So there's a lot of unfamiliarity there, and we want to really tackle that issue. Nationwide, 15 pedestrians are killed and 185 are injured in crashes every single day. When I talk about pedestrians, it's very important that we talk about fatalities and injuries because there is a very fine line between the two. So if you look at kind of the makeup of the traffic and where that's happening, you know, you have motorcyclists, but pedestrians, bicyclists, and non-occupants. We have had a bit of an issue probably over the last year with pedestrians on interstate. Very, very different type of a pedestrian issue. But still a pedestrian, someone gets a disabled motorist or a flat tire or something along that line. But very different issues, so we're trying to tackle all of these issues at the same time. This next slide is just very much a graphic depiction of the fine line between injuries and fatalities. There is a very, very fine line. But getting into the next slide, we start to really talk about where the issues are happening in Montgomery County and statewide. I focused here in Montgomery County, of course, for the purposes of this. But if you look at the clusters of high pedestrian crash frequency, and we like to look at crash frequency versus just fatality because there is such a fine line to really, really understand what's happening. It's Wheaton, it's Silver Spring, it's Bethesda, and then going up Rockville, Gaithersburg, Germantown, to a certain extent a little bit in Olney as well.
Can I ask, when you say fine line, you mean that we should be focusing on serious injuries and fatalities,
Everything.
right? Because
It's a fine line between someone who is just minor injury and serious injury and a fatality with a pedestrian. They just have absolutely no protection. So if you look at what's happening statewide, you'll see that, you know, frankly, it's not just a Montgomery County issue. We're dealing with this in many parts of the state, Prince George's County, Montgomery County, Baltimore City, Harford County, Baltimore County, Anne Arundel County, and then, you know, really looking at our statewide numbers. The difference is each one of these instances is very different and unique. Pedestrian safety in rural areas is very different than pedestrian safety in urbanized areas. But as you can see, it's very much a statewide issue and very much an issue that we're focused on. If you look at kind of what's happening, 30% of all crashes are happening at intersections, 35% are happening between the hours of 3 and 7. All of the ones that happened in the last 24 hours were all in that evening hour, that dinner time hour. You know, you have the other thing on top of this now is, you know, the daylight savings time, and it's a little darker than people are used to. those types of things. Speed, back to my earlier point, is a major factor in survivability for pedestrians. 40 mile an hour crash into a pedestrian is 77% likelihood of being a fatality. Very, very serious issue. And you'll notice that that statistic drastically changes at the 30 mile an hour range. Very much changes. So what are we doing about it? So let me talk a little bit about the changes that we've done in the way we analyze these crashes. So we're not just looking at, what is this crash and what had happened. We're also looking from a preventative standpoint. What are the land use characteristics? Where are these happening? Are they happening in purely urban areas? Are they happening in rural areas? Are they happening on high-speed roadways? Are they happening in neighborhood roadways? This root cause is very different than something we've done before, and it gets back to, I believe it was Councilman Berliner brought this up, but going back to when you have a pedestrian issue, it's really important, it's just as important to understand why they're crossing there as it is to understand whether they were in the crosswalk or not. Where are people living? Where are they going? Is there a bus stop? Is there a pedestrian generator there? Are they going there because that's where they need to go? And it's not just all about are they in the crosswalk or not. Should there be a crosswalk there? And having part of that conversation is really part of the analysis that we're going through today. The context, the demographics and land use in the area. Who and where are the roadway users? Where are they coming from and where are they going to? Are we building our network to the point where it's accessible and gives them a choice in being able to get where they need to be? Infrastructure, it's the state of our roadway. It's the design that frankly is 50 years old in many cases. And getting back to where we can get that to the point. It's bus stops, it's lighting, it's the infrastructure itself. And then working on very, very targeted, to Councilman Elrich's point, many of the things that we can do are very practical, very cost sensitive. But the overall redevelopment, trying to redevelop every highway in the state at the same time is a different issue altogether. But there are things that we can do today. So in our urban design standard, we broke it down. This is just somewhat informational. We were breaking down our functional class system into different land use characteristics now as well, to looking at what we can do in these areas to understand that. We built some tools for our engineers, so our engineers now have pedestrian safety tools on their desktop that they're working on, trying to understand a little bit of that root cause. Why are people crossing there? Where are they going? Those types of things. And then taking every opportunity. This is the first step of what we're going to be doing, very much related to a lot of the comments that we had before, the short-term strategy that we're going to do. And I'm going to be asking the council to help me identify a little bit of kind of the what and where of these central business districts and where they are. But we're prepared to do two things immediately in the central business districts. The first is lower the speed limit to 30 miles an hour in all central business districts. The second is to implement continental striping on all of the crosswalks. We're seeing nationally that the statistical decrease in conflicts is upwards of 30 to 40% when you stripe a crosswalk with continental striping. It's very broad, it's very wide, attention-getting, calms the traffic. Those are the things that we can do right away. Now, the striping in particular, I do need about a window of about 5 days of 50-degree weather, so some of it we're going to fight our way through the spring, but the speed limits we can work through very quickly on those. I do like to, when we do those, we do like to put some things like variable message signs out and give people a few weeks to really do some outreach and get people to understand the speed limits will be lowered. And then we'll be working with our partners in enforcement and how that works in education. But it really is, there's a strong educational component that I would advocate for before we just go lower speed limit and then combine that with other strategies, because there are things that we need to do to slow the traffic down outside of just the speed limit. Sure.
We have a queue, actually.
I just wanted to ask about 30 mile, why 30, not 25?
Sure. Well, how far are we through your presentation?
We're about 3/4 of the way.
Okay, why don't we finish it up, and then we'll come back, and people can flag the issues they want to address.
So we're also looking at the other short-term opportunities, and I'm going to get into some specifics in some specific areas. But when we resurface roadways, are there opportunities to tighten the lane widths? are there opportunities to take that extra space and put that on the outside and provide some pedestrian protection there, even if it's just striping? What can we do at the same time we're out there resurfacing a roadway? So think about our resurfacing program. We touch a roadway, give or take a year or so, depending on the volume of traffic, every 8 to 10 years. So, as you're getting out there, you lose that opportunity, but there is an opportunity to really redevelop a little bit of your system as you're out there resurfacing and rebuilding the system. The minor geometric fixes, taking some striping and turning it into more islands in some of these areas to slow some of that traffic down. And then the longer term is more of major realignment. It's those types of things, redesigning, rebuilding a lot of that infrastructure as opportunities arise. And I think the major piece, you can build towards a lot of that major piece by touching it on these minor ones as we move along, making that a little bit more practical. So where to start? So we put a couple of examples in here. The first one, 97, the Wheaton area. From a short-term perspective, we're going to go out and make sure we have pedestrian recall at every single one of the signals there. Make sure you hit that button, and that will give that. You'll have a pedestrian phase whether you hit the button or not in that normal cycle. Upgrading all those walks. The curb markers, many of them, we've started to put them out there now. The yellow kind of do not cross type crosswalk markers. Midterm, we're working with the county on some median fencing, but I do think before we go into really hardcore median fencing, I think it's important that we understand why people are crossing there and understand what's happening so that we can make sure that whole issue is addressed as well. And then getting into opportunities for mid-block crossings and those types of things where the density, where the intersection spacing allows you to do that. And then lead pedestrian intervals on our signals, kind of giving that priority. Long-term, just really looking at more of our pedestrian road safety audit program, but also kind of major redesign of roadways when you can get in there. Aspen Hill was another one. We're going to be tackling that one pretty quickly. We're looking at a new signal at 97 in Heathfield that's going to have crosswalks, audio pedestrian signals, as well as that lead pedestrian interval and pedestrian phasing there. Midterm, we have a new signal and crosswalk that will come next summer. We're looking at that at 97 in May Street near Rippling Brook. That's the crosswalk. And then kind of longer term, looking at opportunities to really get into that redesign and kind of work through that. And then I think these partnerships moving forward are really focused on how do we redesign a lot of these roadways that were designed and built 50 years ago, and the land use has just kind of moved much faster than the redesign of these roadways. We can't do them all overnight, but that doesn't mean we can't have a plan and really start working towards it a little bit at a time. Partnering with our law enforcement agencies and really designing for pedestrians in those areas. It's and I'll end where I started. It's mobility, it's accessibility, it's equity, it's choice, it's everything, all in that conversation. And we're going to need, frankly, a lot of the users at the table with us while we're trying to develop these solutions and really trying to develop that long-term vision. We're going to need the people that are using it every single day to be at the table with us and helping us develop that long-term vision. But that doesn't mean we can't start implementing some of these crosswalk signals and as well as some of these speed limit issues today as we start working towards that. The corridor approach, I'll touch on a little bit at the end, but we've completely revamped our pedestrian safety audit program where we're really doing a little bit more collaboratively, really working and walking corridors with groups of folks and just trying to understand what's happening there, where they're going, get some feedback, some ideas. And then building a clear pipeline so that stuff is not sitting on the shelf and it can be implemented right away through some of our district operations as well as some of our larger capital program. Really taking that audit approach and putting it in the project queue so that when you go out there and resurface or you go out there and do some touch on the intersection, you can address all of that at the same time and being able to tackle those when opportunities arise. You can't tackle them unless it's on the plan and it's on the books, but the opportunities arise. I know many times over the course of my career, the rollers are out ready to resurface a roadway, and all of a sudden an idea comes to the table, and it's just too late to react. The key is to have those plans and have it there to react, so that when we can do it together. So at this point, I will say that if we start getting into too much of a one crosswalk at a certain intersection or another, I might have to follow up with you, but but
Okay.
I'm happy to work through all of it with every single one of you.
Thank you, Greg Slater from SHA, for being here. Several council members have lights on, and then we'll go to council members, and then I think would be very useful to have any reactions from our, those who are also at the panel. So I'll start with Craig Rice.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Slater. So I'll just give you my role. I chair the Education Committee for the council, and so I'm very concerned about safe walk routes to school and how that interfaces with SHA. I will say that after the tragic death of Christina Morris Ward at the intersection of 118 and Wisteria, SHA was instrumental working with MCDOT in making some significant changes there in terms of the intersection. After the pedestrian incident where 2 students were killed at Kingsview at 117 and Kingsview Road, SHA and DOT, again, very responsive in terms of making some changes. If you see the continual pattern here, what we see is we're continuing to chase the problem, and we're not getting ahead of the issues. We currently have students who walk to Kingsview Middle School who travel through one of the most dangerous intersections, not only in the Germantown Upcounty area, which is the intersection of 118 and 117, but also is where we continue to see issues of high traffic incidences throughout, and it's one of the worst intersections in the county. And so my question to you, sir, is that does SHA engineering take into account where safe walk routes to school are, where our children are going, either via walk routes or bus stops, when it comes to deciding on what signal light timing or the kinds of crosswalks that you have in those particular areas?
Sure. We look at the volumes at those intersections and try and work locally with our partners to understand where they're coming from, where the school is, not only where the school is, but where are they getting off of a bus? Are they coming from a neighborhood? Are they walking? We do that. At times, you have to just get out and kind of continually learn as things are kind of happening at the intersection. But yes, we do.
Okay, because it sounds to me as though your answer didn't sound like it's that you actually do those things. So do you have a listing of your safe walk routes for your schools and incorporate that into the design and engineering when you're doing projects or when you're designing intersections for those particular places? And let me give you a specific example. At the intersection of 117 and 118, you guys had a construction project, state project, to where you were revamping and doing ADA compliance and changing so that you had the accessibility on those sidewalks. Well, that's the safe walk route to school. And so children were having to walk in the street to go around the construction to then get to their school. This is 2 years ago when this happened, and I immediately contacted and said, oh, we'll figure this out very quickly. But in the meantime, there was no coordination. There was no communication with parents to say, hey, we're interrupting this route. And it created a situation where a person had been killed by a dump truck right in front of the fire station that's right down on 118 only a year prior. These are kids who are being forced into dangerous situations because we're not thinking about those kinds of steps. And so it's my hope that we take this to the next level. It's not a criticism of you in terms of saying what we're not doing. It's how we can do things better to ensure the safety. We have to make sure that we're coordinating these efforts. So I would hope, and this is my ask, that at every single intersection where we know that children are walking to school through safe walk routes, we do an analysis of that intersection specifically around those children that are walking through that intersection, especially when they're middle school students. I mean, you're talking about the youngest of kids, my daughter who's 13, who doesn't always make the best decision, who doesn't always pay attention. We know that they're on their phones, and when we tell them to put them down, we know that they're still there, let alone our high school students. And so from that perspective, we've got to do all that we can to ensure that we're protecting these kids. The second piece of that would be the hope that when we're talking about our bus stops, that we're also incorporating those when we're looking at speed limits. So when you're looking at doing the lowering of speed limits, and kudos to you for looking at that, and you said central business districts, the only thing is that I know Councilmember Navarro, myself, really don't have any central business districts that are there, but we still have urban areas that are, Nancy May has one. Oh, Wheaton, I'm sorry, but I have none. And so from that perspective, while we might not have the moniker, we still have the traffic associated with it. And so from that perspective, I hope that you look at those too. But certainly when it comes to the bus stops, that's another piece, because it's going to help us in terms of our overall coordination. I've had this conversation with MCPS as well, but I think, again, what we need to do is we need to bring you together to make sure that there's a comprehensive approach that should be the same throughout, whether it's in Wheaton, whether it's in Bethesda, whether it's in Silver Spring, whether it's in Germantown or Damascus, always at intersections where we know we have kids walking. We need to have a set, systematic approach to how we're going to ensure their safety. So I would just ask you for that. Now, lastly, to step away and put on my district council member hat instead of chair of the education committee, at 117, we've had continuous issues on Clopper Road. As we have people who continue to walk down Clopper Road, I asked them, and it's interesting when you say about you need to just go out there sometimes and talk to people. And so I was out there because we were trying to figure out why people walk up and down 117, which is very dangerous between Metz and Mattini, and you don't have to know it. It's a very curvy road. In fact, it was one in which John Denver penned his song, Country Road. It's about 117 Clopper Road. And it's very dangerous in those curves, and we're just waiting for a person to get killed. I understand that we have limitations because of the environmental easements that are there and at play on that side. But just saying that and not doing anything else, I will tell you that the council did its part in working with SHA. We asked a few people and they said, well, the reason why I walked down is because the covered bus stop is actually at the intersection of Mattini and 117. So we put a covered bus stop at the intersection of Metz and 117 to help alleviate that. But there are still people who walk down because there's a shopping center. Well, not a shopping center, it's a 7-Eleven, a grocery, and a gas station, and some other things that are there. But it's still a continuous problem for us as we see pedestrians go down there, and there's sidewalk that leads up to that point and then stops right at where the neighborhood is. And so, again, it's areas like that that I think that we kind of throw up our hands and say that we're limited, but the reality is that people continue to put their lives at risk. So either we prevent them from doing that by putting things that are in place that prevent them from walking at all down that little narrow strip of shoulder, or we create sidewalks and come up with some kind of new approach to be able, or innovative way in which we can do something with a sidewalk. So I just specifically asked for that one. You don't have to get back to me now, but one in which I'm very concerned about what may happen if we continue to leave the problem unchecked. So thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to working with you on trying to figure out the best way for us to approach our intersections with our kids. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Mark, followed by Tom.
Same question I asked. Is there a difference between 25 and 30, and why not 25?
So we found, so from a speed limit legal perspective, we found that there's some clarity in the way the law is written for speed limits for 30 in central business districts without getting into the 85th percentile component. But we also found that 30 is really that tipping point from, I don't have that graph in front of me, but that tipping point of where you really start to see the incline, the data perspective. And I'm happy to follow up and kind of share that graph with you, but it really is startling when it comes to that.
So my theory would be, based on that graph, is that if I set the speed limit at 30, most people will cheat slightly above 30. They'll be doing 35 or more. And so if I set it at 25, they'll cheat above 25, but the cheating above 25 may keep them closer to 30. So, and if we need to ask our legislators to write something that makes that clearer, if the state would support it, then that would make it easier for us to get it through the legislature. So I assume we should ask our legislators for something like that. I don't want a lack of clarity.
No, absolutely. And from my standpoint, I'm open to any partnership that we can work on.
Great.
So,
thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Slater. It would make a big difference if SHA were working with us on speed limits on state highways and in urban areas. That would be a huge, huge boost. Mr. Hooker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Slater, for being here and your team. And thank you for your recent intervention, personal intervention in relocating the sidewalk, the crosswalk across Piney Branch and Sligo Creek Parkway. That's made a big difference. Almost every day, somebody stops me and acknowledges the improvements there. And I point to your personal intervention there and your ability to get that problem, which had been stuck for over a year. And I know the construction of the entire project is still, considerably behind schedule, but making the pedestrian safety fix there, I think was long overdue, and it was all due to your personal intervention. Unfortunately, that all happened after that video was widely shared of a child nearly getting hit by an SUV that crossed the crosswalk, a small child who had to brake in the crosswalk to avoid being killed. That was the near miss that was recorded on video. There has been a near miss like that just about every day over the last year, while after that mid-block crosswalk was created. So I'm grateful for your personal intervention there. We need your personal intervention in a lot of other intersections in Montgomery County, particularly on the east side, where there have been pedestrian safety needs that have been either ignored or studied to death for an awful long time. We have had, we had 6 serious pedestrian accidents in 3 hours on November 11th. There are so many other intersections that I think require your personal attention, and we can't do it on our own. This council, during the last budget cycle, had brought to our attention lots of pedestrian safety concerns by our constituents on Dale Drive, also in my district. It was a relatively small group of people in a 1 million-person county that brought that to our attention, set up a Facebook group, testified in front of all of us, and our DOT very quickly agreed to new signs, new paint, enhanced crosswalks, enhanced shoulders, and $300,000 the council approved for a study of long-term improvements there, but that's a county road. And that's what we've been able to do, because we're very serious about our Vision Zero commitment. On a county road, since September, we've had, as of September, we have 11 pedestrian fatalities, is my understanding, in Montgomery County, 10 on state highways. So I feel like we're doing everything we can do on our county roads, and we really need, again, your personal intervention in a lot of these areas on the state roads. Let me mention a couple that you and I have discussed before. SHA installed a hawk beacon on Maryland 410 at Bethesda Chevy Chase High School last year, right? Has that beacon been effective?
It has. It has.
So will hawks now be installed at other crosswalks on state arterials that are now unsignalized?
Absolutely. It's a tool in our toolbox now. It's in our MUTCD.
Right. How many do you anticipate installing this year?
So we're looking at a couple of different options. We've actually, on some of the areas that we've looked at them, we've ended up with more of a full pedestrian signal versus the hawk. But we're continuing to look. I can't give you a whole list of those areas, but I'm happy to follow up and tell you where those ones are being considered.
I'd like to follow up, but we're almost in 2019. Do you have any goals for how many hawks you want to install in 2019?
No, I don't have goals for the amount of signals in particular, but I can certainly give you an assessment of where we have them in our queue.
Okay, I'd really like to get that follow-up. You met with me and my staff a year ago about a number of crosswalks and areas where we need crosswalks on US 29. Just a year ago, last week, Elaine Allen, 71-year-old Elaine Allen, was killed crossing from where we have a bus stop to get across a 6-lane highway to her apartment complex, where there's no crosswalk, much less pedestrian signal on that divided state highway. Nothing's happened in the intervening year now. We just passed a year since her tragic death. Do you have any update on that?
No, but I can get you that.
What about the intersection, the crosswalk at Indian Spring, where State Highway had previously approved flashing pedestrian signals over that crosswalk and then decided to study it for longer and then issued findings that were queued up for approval almost a year ago?
Sure. I tried to kind of convey this a little bit in the beginning, but
Sure.
I didn't come here prepared to talk about individual crosswalks and lights. I can certainly follow up if there's individual locations like the ones you've listed. I have my assistant here, and he's helping me kind of track those. We can circle back, but I came here more kind of thinking about the broad, what we're going to do in these areas, in these corridors, and some of the actions, but I can certainly follow back up with.
I'd appreciate that. So let me ask you more generally, many pedestrian collisions obviously occur in the vicinity of bus stops, as you've mentioned. Have State Highway and MCDOT worked together specifically at systematic ways to improve bus stop pedestrian access, aside from those kind of one-off examples?
Yeah, so we do that at a district level, and we work through that holistically, and okay, there's a bus stop here. One of the things that we have found when you start to really dig into the data is it's not just the urbanized areas that have these issues. Sometimes it could be, maybe an apartment complex or something like that out in probably a suburban area where there's no sidewalks and really no other services that are right there. So, those are the issues that we're trying to focus on and making sure that those folks that are trying to access that bus stop or get across that particular roadway have the ability to do that. But absolutely, Al and I and Chris and I, we have a great relationship. We continue to work together on a lot of these issues.
Just to amplify, this is one of the engineering objectives in our Vision Zero, and we've completed 2 of the bus stop audits already and have 2 in progress. The 2 that are in progress are Middlebrook Road and the Wheaton CBD. 2 that are completed are 355, which is, I think, in the north part of the corridor. I'm missing the date on the other one, but I know that there were 2 completed.
I'm also really happy to hear about the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit and I agree with Mr. Elrich about the need to go to 25 in our central business districts and the continental striping of the crosswalks. What is holding State Highway back from restriping all lane widths at, including the curb lanes at 10 feet in arterials where sidewalks are present?
So somewhat of geometry. So sometimes you have to make sure that there's the vertical curve and the horizontal curves all kind of match, and you just kind of restripe. But you also look at the truck traffic in those areas, the bus stops, those types of things. So in those urbanized areas, if it's a roadway, maybe it's a principal arterial that maybe carries some truck traffic. We want to be mindful of that in those areas. And what we found there is sometimes you can find a combination, whether it's 10s and 11 on the outside or something along that line.
Do you have some arterials that you're targeting for narrowing to 10-foot widths?
97.
Okay. Anywhere else besides 97?
We're looking
What
at
about 29?
We're looking at some options in 29, and then we're looking at 97 as well. And those are just ones that came up because of resurfacing efforts that were coming out that we could take the opportunity.
You mentioned the increase in pedestrian collisions during the 3 to 7 p.m. period, especially during now that standard time has begun. What's State Highway's approach to increasing lighting, particularly around intersections and all along arterials between intersections and dense areas?
Yeah, our focus at first is on intersections, but also looking at those opportunities where you have that situation where I had just described on, a bus stop in a somewhat of a suburban roadway, making sure that we have some lighting out there. But we're in the process right now of kind of doing a bit of an audit of our lighting system all around and trying to understand, do we have too many lights in some areas and not enough in others, and trying to maximize that sweet spot.
What's the role of the public? What role can the public play in that?
Oh, certainly. I think the biggest role that the public can play in that is letting us hear about, I'm traveling this particular area and the lighting is challenging. You can only do so much with an engineer that's looking at something from a technical perspective and looking at the generators. Any feedback that we get on someone who's particularly out there at a different time of night or a different time early in the morning, because we are seeing a lot of folks out early in the morning as well, and saying lighting is a challenge out there, and that helps us to understand the need.
Okay, that's good to hear. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And before I pass it over to Mr. Katz, I will just ask any council member who has a specific location they want to, we can compile these and then forward them to you for subsequent follow-up. We didn't really invite you with the expectation you'd be able to answer with specific. We wanted to talk in more general, but to the extent that you are, it's terrific. Mr. Katz, you're up.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you, Mr. Slater, for being here and for bringing everyone with you. I know that this is a great concern of yours, just like it is of all of ours and everyone candidly throughout the area. You know, I've often heard that the best spot for a sidewalk is to follow that beaten path and to figure out where someone has actually gone before us so that you know where people want to go. But when you do that for a crosswalk, that becomes a different problem because you have to have enough space and that someone who's driving understands that they have to have time enough in order to stop so that it can be safe. And anymore, as you pointed out in your presentation, we probably have more people distracted than we've ever had before because of cell phones and other types of mechanical and electrical devices. So we need to make certain that the education piece, and we need to include Montgomery County Public Schools and everybody else in this, we need to make certain that the education piece reminds everybody that they are vulnerable. And because we forget that. I mean, and someone said, who here hasn't done something, not walked in a crosswalk or jaywalked? And of course, we all have over time. It's not, no car is coming and then a car comes around the corner. So we have to be so very, very careful. But I guess the first question I have is for the bus stops. Have you put, especially in the state highways, and I appreciate the 30 mile, and I think that Mark's suggestion of going down to 25 miles an hour, even those people that are going faster than the speed limit still are at least under the possibility that someone could survive a strike. But in some of the crosswalk, in some of the bus stops, have you considered putting bollards near them or in front of them? And I know that in some cases we don't have a wide sidewalk, but maybe something would be something that would give that extra moment that someone could survive a crash like we've had from some of our students who are waiting for bus stops. And there again, we had discussed this before when our police were here, but the idea of fencing and medians, that, at least would stop some people from walking across that street. I can tell you, just 2 weeks ago, I was going to Strathmore. A young man who, I saw him walk across, there's a pedestrian light there. He walked across while traffic was driving, and cars stopped. He went to the median, he stood in the median, and finally, cars came around him, and then he walked across again. I mean, thank goodness he wasn't struck. I got to Strathmore and he was there, so he was faster than traffic. But it was unbelievable to me that someone would do this, and this was in broad daylight, and the weather was clear. So what happens if it were raining? What happens if it were, these other? It had tragedy written all over it, or potential tragedy. The whole idea for the lining on streets, certainly I applaud that. I can tell you that when it's raining, whether it be 270 or whether it be somewhere else, it's very difficult to see the lines there. And I guess we all need to work on lighting. I can tell you that on 270, especially on some of our state highways and quite candidly neighborhood streets as well, it's difficult to see, and there's shadows. If people are wearing dark clothing, it becomes difficult. My office has been working on the lighting at Falls Road and 270 for quite some time. You were going to put in lighting, and you were going to get back to it, and I'm not being critical of this, but it's taken much longer than it should have. And every time we contact them, they said, we're going to do it very soon, and we just haven't gotten to very soon yet. But those types of places, and not that gets that much pedestrian traffic, but it certainly gets some, and there's a sidewalk there. And so we need to make certain that our lighting certainly is much better. I guess we've talked about this way before the tragedies that we had just last night. I mean, we've talked about Vision Zero and how concerned we are. I candidly think Vision Zero is a bad name for this, for that endeavor. I think that it should be that people do see what's going on rather than I understand what the title is, that we want to get to zero pedestrian fatalities and zero pedestrian struck. But we worked on this for a long time, but I think because of the distractions, but I think because of people not necessarily paying attention as much as they used to. I mean, people on skateboards and people doing all of these things that we didn't necessarily have before, that's part of the problem. But I also think that we need to, the education part is an extremely important part. But many times when we hear about someone being struck, we say, well, they weren't in the crosswalk. Well, they weren't doing so-and-so. And they weren't. But that doesn't take back what happened. And so we have to figure out what's the best way to stop what is happening, whether it's traditional or not. So I thank you for your efforts. I thank you for being here. And quite candidly, I thank you for working with us. And I can tell you have great partners sitting at that table. But I thank you for working with us so that we can correct this together and to save lives. Thanks.
Absolutely, and thank you, man. Thank you, Councilman. Let me kind of touch on a few of the points there. First thing, I always try, we need to slow some of these cars down. You know, the crosswalks are not crosswalks. We need to slow some of these cars down. When it comes to the school children in particular, we have to assume that they're going to do things that we're not expecting them to do. That they're kids, that's what they're going to do. And you know, they're not going to judge the timing of the car right. They're not going, you know, they're going to do some of these things. You know, I was a kid too, and you know, we all were at some point, and you know, you have to deal with, you have to make sure. So really the focus at first is really getting these cars to slow down and providing some protection for some of these users that are out there today. And it's not just, you know, these are users of all different purposes, and they really need to be out there. And frankly, some of them, they don't have any other choice. They're trying to access a bus system and get to work, and we need to provide some protection for that. The bollards, we've done a couple of different things over the years. Some of it's, we'll put a piece of barrier up. That has worked at times. Sometimes we've experimented with those flex posts. They don't really provide much protection, but they're more of a kind of a feel type of a thing to give someone a little bit. But yeah, so we have worked in some of those areas for bollards and tried to, more on the urban areas. I believe Councilman Hucker and I worked on one not too long ago where people were kind of coming across a sidewalk to access a parking lot. And we needed to figure out how to stop that from happening, and because they were cutting across the driveway accesses. You know, even little things like right turn on red with people that are in bike lanes, those types of things are really, really a lot of education that has to happen for people to do that. And we have people out there driving have a lot of things that they're focused on, and we need to educate them in many ways that where we need them focused is the people around them, and we'll continue to do that. The line striping, you're going to see some changes in line striping over the next probably couple of years as the cycle. We've moved towards, this is another thing that I started about a year and a half ago. We're getting away from, we're trying to build more consistency with our line striping, more of a thermoplastic type of a treatment versus we were partially paint, partially inlaid. You know, there are a couple of different options. We're building some consistency there to focus more on life cycle, so you'll start to see that improve over the course of the system. But yes, a lot of those pavement markings start to wear, and then when it starts to rain and the sun goes down, it's really difficult to see. So it just really is on us to make sure we're paying attention more.
Can I make one?
Yeah, yes, you may, Christy. I wanted to thank you, Mr. Katz. I think, yeah, okay, good. Christy.
This is just in follow-up to some comments that Councilmember Rice and Councilmember Katz made. While I'm here in the capacity as the chair of the county's Pedestrian, Bike, and Traffic Safety Advisory Committee, I'm also a delegate to the Montgomery County Council of PTAs for Highland Elementary, which is in Wheaton, right off of Veers Mill Road. And I wanted to note that recently the Montgomery County Council of PTAs formed an ad hoc committee on safe routes to school and bus stops. And there's a process that has just begun to start working with MCPS in looking at safe routes to school and bus stops and thinking about where there can be interventions following both the incident for the Kennedy High School bus stop, but also some other areas where there have been noted concerns, such as the Veirs Mill crossing at Norris Drive. 2 or 3 years ago, the community had asked for a traffic light there, and it was denied. Subsequently, of course, the Montgomery County Planning Department has done some work in thinking about how that corridor could be revisioned to incorporate Vision Zero principles. And not shockingly to those of us who live in the community, there were some very telling videos of middle schoolers and high schoolers crossing 6 lanes of traffic in a crosswalk, unmarked, of course. But there are many, many areas across the county, including some that Councilmember Rice mentioned, and the couple that I've mentioned. And the Montgomery County Council PTAs, I know, is ready and willing to start working on those issues with both the council and with state highways.
Thank you, Chris. I think as Greg said, kids are going to make mistakes, but
Humans are going to make mistakes.
humans, and I was going to say, if people are going to make mistakes, but if a vehicle is going 40 miles an hour, that mistake will be fatal, and if the vehicle is going 20 miles an hour, that pedestrian is going to survive most of the time.
And I would also note that, given the work that the planning department has undergone on that Veirs Mill corridor, they've shown, while it's not formal design in the way that you all need to do it from an engineering perspective, they've shown that you can take the existing right-of-way in many areas and really improve the pedestrian and traffic infrastructure. And so, you know, I would just encourage us all to look at those types of interventions, particularly where we know there's a very pressing issue.
Thank you. And we do need to get our DOT in on this conversation and so forth, but I'm going to pass it to, yeah, we're going to pass it to Roger and then others, yourself.
Mr. Slater, thank you. I do, again, see you as a good partner. I couldn't tell from your body language, do you support in urban areas reducing to 25 miles an hour?
I think it would depend on the geometry of the roadway, but I mean, if the geometry fits that and there's enough spacing and you know, it works, I think, you know, it's tough to not look at it from a individual location, but certainly I'm open to that conversation.
So you had suggested that there was some ambiguity in the law with respect to it.
So the law actually specifically talks about 30 miles an hour in central business districts. It doesn't talk about 25 in central business districts. So I think we just have to kind of work through to see what options we have.
So my question to you is, why can't that be a department bill that you put forward to say, let's change that language so it's 25 miles an hour?
I can certainly have that conversation. I don't have to make that call, but I can certainly have that conversation.
Thank you. With respect to,
And specifically, it would just allow them.
Right.
Right now, you're not allowed,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So this wouldn't be in every urban area in the state. You would
you'd
be
still have that
mandating.
discretion.
Why wouldn't you support additional
And I'm not sure.
authority?
I'm not sure that we don't have that discretion today. I think that's what I have to kind of get to from a legal perspective, but we started with 30 just because it was there and we were trying to kind of work through it. But
Would you get back to us on that legal analysis so that we understand whether or not the county should be working with you on a department bill to clarify this?
I think what's really important to me is that we're not arbitrary in where we do it. It's more about these are the criteria, this is what is met, and we kind of get to whether it's a policy direction that this is what we're going to do in these areas.
And again, leaving you the discretion on a case-by-case basis to decide where it's right, but making it clear that you do have the authority to go there. Okay. Second, I've heard Mr. Hucker and others say, thank you to all the good work you do, and we want to bring each and every one of these intersections to your attention. I have to say, I don't see that as your job, okay? We've got a big state. So our frustration has often been at the district level. Our frustration has been at the traffic office, okay? And so my request to you is, how much are you meeting with your district people in your traffic office and making sure that they understand the new direction? Because every time we raise our hand, they go, I'm sorry, we can't do this, you don't have to go, blah, blah, blah. And we get this story that is just so unsatisfying. So I get your personal commitment, and I say, you can't do it all. And if you are doing it all, then there's a lot of things you're not doing. So what's the work at the engineer level?
It's a great question, and I think where that comes down to is this development of our urban standards. Once that's done and you give those engineers at the district level that toolbox that they can hang their hat on, you give them that policy guidance that says, we want 25, we want 30 mile an hour in the central business districts. You just give them the tools and you kind of build some clarity on what expectations we want there. One thing I've found with our traffic engineers over the years is they're really good at solving issues if you just give them kind of that piece there. Where we get challenged with them is you give them the solution before we talk about the problem. So I think we want to talk about that all together and figure out how to do that. But it is very much making sure that we have the right design guidelines, the right policy directives, the right people at the table when we're making those decisions. And that means that maybe the folks in our district traffic office are coordinating back with headquarters, but also back with our planners and also back with our bike and pedestrian professionals and kind of looking at all of that together.
So I heard you earlier today speak to the 50 years that we've had our road design and things of that nature. And the manual, to me, is a perfect reflection of that. Tell me your commitment to updating the manual. Why can't we just really make it the heart of the manual, Vision Zero, so we're not having these fights intersection by intersection?
It is. It's continual, and we're in the process of kind of modernizing our entire organization, and that's a big part of it. Let me kind of give you a little bit of a kind of background from a national perspective as well. So, a lot of the manual for uniform traffic control devices is built by a team of traffic engineers, and it works through AASHTO, and it works through the Transportation Research Board, and everybody kind of comes together on this. Well, AASHTO, about 2 years ago, did some complete restructuring. And so I was privileged enough to be one of the 6 people across the country that they asked to go into a room and figure out how to restructure AASHTO. And as part of that conversation, there were a lot of things that happened. For the first time in national AASHTO history, there is formal organizational structure around active transportation. There is formal organizational structure around data and understanding how that's all happening together. And not only is there formal organizational structure, they're now at the table with the chief engineers in developing all those processes. So what we've done is we've restructured so that from an industry perspective, when we're making those decisions and we're still building those manuals, then it's not going through one particular set of people. It's going through a diverse group of expertise, and everybody's getting their bite at the apple and trying to understand how it's applied. Now, some of the first things that they're tackling is trying to understand the urban components of that MUTCD. Is it simply that you lean on something like NACTO, or is it a combination of MUTC, AASHTO, and NACTO together? But I think they're starting to land on that because we're not the only state struggling with it. If you think about state highway from our second, us across the board, when we were originally formed, we didn't have roadways in urban areas. We were suburban roadways in Baltimore City, handled Baltimore City. You look back to the beginning of time with the State Roads Commission. Now we have areas that are along U.S. routes and principal arterials that are purely urban in nature from a land use perspective, and we need to make sure that that matches up. The functional class, we have roadways that I wish I could say that the state roadways are carrying all the traffic, but some of the local roadways are carrying just as much traffic, and people are moving around, and so the functional class system is a little bit different, and so we need to figure out how to get that all back to where it needs to be.
And does it need to be driven at the national level? How much discretion do you have at the state level to do what we need you to do?
A lot, and we're here to do that with you.
Thank you.
Nancy Navarro.
Thank you so much. So for me, one of the goals of this particular session was to identify ways that, we can communicate at the granular level many of the issues that have been raised. Because I think especially each district council member has a long list of particular intersections and roads and areas. And so, and it's wonderful to know that we also have very active constituents that are already working hard to identify many of these particulars. So one of the things that I was hoping that we could agree upon, and especially since we have our executive-elect here as well, is to look at establishing a very short duration type of task force that can go into the specifics of our districts, and maybe some also countywide issues, because in that way we can bring to the table, as it was already mentioned, our school system and CPTA, our park and planning, all of our partners, the police department that does a lot of the traffic work, our local Department of Transportation, and really see how we can align everything. Because my worry is that we do this a lot, where we have different priorities, things that are happening, projects that are going forward, but then it's kind of like, oh, if we had just thought about including the bus stops for the schools, et cetera. I think that we could really benefit in taking a fresh look at where we are right now, and then be able to sort of triage this whole issue of the short-term, mid-term, and long-term. And so that is something that I wanted to, bring up to my colleagues and the executive-elect. Ms. Daphne is here. She's, launched an amazing, group of folks who have identified some issues. We have, Mr. Dan Thompson from the Wheaton area as well. They've already identified a lot of issues. So the good news is that, again, as you said, in terms of involving the community, we already have a lot of knowledge and a lot of particulars that we can incorporate into some kind of, report that we can then say, hey, this is where I think we have some opportunities. This is where the county has some opportunities as well. Let's look at the resource issue. Let's look at what's possible. Let's do this comprehensively and not in a siloed sort of approach. So anyway, so I'll be drafting, a more formal memorandum, but it was something that I wanted to share as one of the outcomes that I was hoping we could come out of this session ready to go.
Absolutely, I'm completely open to it. I think really there'd be a lot of value in having a broader discussion first and then tackling down to some of the different corridors or locations. But that broader discussion on how we can work together collectively and then say, let's start tackling these corridors, because you can bring a diverse group of folks together that really have different perspectives and tackle it. But then when you get down to the users, we're going to need to tackle them individually as well.
Yeah.
Really give us some guidance.
No, that would be great. And like I said before, we have some really ripe opportunities right now, given some of those projects that are already happening throughout the county. So, we don't want to have to then come back and address issues. Why not just do it right now, and then we can just kind of coordinate and align all of that.
Very good. Craig Rice?
Yeah, and I want to echo this, and I really want to thank Council Vice President Navarro. When this had first happened, she and I talked in great detail about this and really wanted to get a standardization model, something that was consistent, because what we continue to hear is that things are different and are responsive to the problems that are happening. So if you look at Great Seneca, for example, on Great Seneca Highway, which is a major thoroughfare, we actually dropped the speed limit there, and during school hours, right? So something that's supportive, and so just something as simple as that, but that doesn't happen at every single high school, right? And so why not? And so certainly it's in response to students getting hit. Great Seneca, we also have a huge fence that goes all along Northwest High School where the student was hit to keep students from crossing across, and so they're forced to go to the intersections. But still at those intersections, we've had students get hit. Captain Didona is nodding because Captain Didona knows he's on the phone with me all the time about this. But so again, let me just say that what I'm asking for when I talk about this is a more standardized approach when it comes to all of our school areas throughout the county, and looking at not only our high schools and middle schools, but keep in mind, we do have a standard walk route for our elementary school students, right? And so we have elementary school students who walk across Richter Farm in Germantown, I'm just giving you an example, which is a 4-lane road, right? With very high speeds, I can tell you, because I live right there. And it's insane to think that a child would actually walk across there by themselves. So there's a lot of this stuff that we have to coordinate together. But my question is, and so I just wanted to echo what Council Vice President said. My question is about something else that I left out that's incredibly important for me, and I just wanted to get your take on this. Do you think it's safe for people to stand in medians at intersections?
You know, it's a really difficult question to answer in terms of, is it safe, period? Is it safer than X? Is it, I think there are a lot of layers to that. What I do think is important is that there is some refuge for people when they're trying to cross and maybe they misjudged or something along that line. But in an ideal world, we wouldn't have anyone need to stop at that. There would be enough time for them to cross and they would be able to do it safely.
So let me just drill down a little bit more. I'm specifically talking to people who are either fundraising, panhandling, or other kinds of aspects in our medians, specifically when it comes to state highway intersections, and whether or not you, as the director, feel as though that's a safe place for folks to be.
Probably not.
Okay. And the reason why I ask is because I know Captain Didone and I have been adamant about trying to reduce throughout, and not just for Montgomery County, but throughout the state when it comes to ensuring that folks who are either panhandling or trying to raise money. I mean, just today as I was coming here, drove past a woman who was not only standing there at the median, but then proceeded to, which they always do, walk into the intersection, holding up her sign, raising money for an important cause that's incredibly important to me about combating domestic violence, but walking up to each car and holding up her sign and her paint can. And if we're truly talking about ensuring that our pedestrians are safe, those folks are included because they go into the count. I mean, we had a person who died in May in Germantown at the intersection of Great Seneca and Middlebrook, who died doing just that. And if we don't have a stance from our administration who's saying that throughout the state, not just Montgomery County, but throughout the state, this is something that we don't want to see, we're going to continue to have these deaths on our hands. And so I really encourage, I know that our delegation has been working on, I know some local jurisdictions have done things on their own, but I really think that our department, our SHA and MDOT need to come out with a statement that says we don't support folks standing on medians in high traffic intersections. If we're going to talk about all these other things that we want to do for people who are just crossing through and utilizing the crosswalk, God forbid we say that it's okay for a person to stand there in the middle and put themselves in harm's way. So again, it's something that I've been working on for a very long time, and would hope that that Department of Transportation, SHA, would be behind and supportive of us getting people out of those dangerous situations. So thank you.
Thank you, council member. All right, I think I will wrap us up. I don't see other council members who have their lights on. So first of all, I want to say thank you to Greg Slater for coming here and for the comments that you made. The overall vision that you've articulated, I think I couldn't agree with more, but the care with which you, and the precision with which you articulated really helped me understand that you really see it all the way from top to bottom, that the world is changing around these roads. And what were once highways for a long-distance suburban commute, not through substantially developed communities, has become in many cases, an urban road through densely developed communities that are either very urban, like a downtown Silver Spring or Germantown, or through very densely developed suburban communities like Aspen Hill or Glenmont. And in either case, there's so many people now coming into contact with the roadway that we have to think differently about how we design these roads and how we build them. And to hear your articulation of potential approaches and the discussion we had about the speed limits is very promising, that we can devise some ways to work together. And I also really appreciate your, kind of raising the possibility or outlining your work on 97. There's been a lot of incidents on 97, and that's where the incidents were that precipitated the letter. It's not the only state highway we need to work on, but it could be a good demonstration project where we could move quickly to identify corridor-wide changes and then move on from that success and keep moving through. So I wanted to ask DOT if you could help us understand how you respond and how you envision working through this process with us.
Well, let me start by saying that having worked with a number of different administrators over the years, I can attest to the fact that there is a different attitude, different culture in the past 2 years with Greg at the helm of the SHA. Certainly, I don't need to repeat all the good things that he just mentioned: speed limits, mid-block crossing, hawk signal. For many years, I argued that hawk signal saves lives, and it does. And I have seen it all over the country that it's very effective. So in terms of partnership, I think we have the partnership at its best in all the years that I have been involved in DOT. And in terms of district level, again, I want to commend Greg for the new leadership in district engineer. He is very, very customer oriented. They have a culture of finding a way to do things positive and saving lives. I think the changes that we've been talking, our community has changed over the many, many years. And I think we have been successful in getting people out of the single occupancy vehicle, because that's why we have more people on a bike. We see a lot of people walking and taking short trips. And we're going to soon see probably scooters and other means of transportation that it's going to require its own infrastructure and, again, change of mind. And certainly reducing the speed is critical. Most of these fatalities are happening because of the speed, and of course some of them are. It's unfortunately, I mean, every single one of them is one too many. But anyway, I think we are on the right track, and in terms of partnership, we're working very collaboratively with Greg and his team, and I can see that. In terms of reducing the speed limit as something that he can immediately do, and it will have an immediate impact. Of course, we're going to hear some complaint for more congestion and more delays, but we will save lives.
Yeah, I mean, but when you, as has been said, no one's driving all that fast during rush hour anyway, but we design the peak to the speed for, that's not necessarily when the incidents happen, but the max speeds are not happening when people are experiencing congestion.
During peak, not on, actually, the speed limit reduction is going to help on off-peak hours, which drivers tends to go faster, but during peak during the day, nobody can go 45 miles an hour on Georgia Avenue through Silver Spring. I mean, it's impossible.
But we're going to have to make additional changes, because if it's just the speed limit that's lowered and the road itself seems to beckon people to step on the accelerator, that is going to be a major conflict. So you can't just change the limit. You've got to adjust the built environment so that the road sends the right signals to people to calm down and be vigilant and, prioritize safety.
And also, I wanted to just close by saying that when I talk about partnership with the state, of course, but our chair of the Pedestrian Safety Advisory Committee, the committee itself, the police department, and the school, we work hand in hand. We cannot resolve this all by individually. We have to attack it as a team, and your idea of this task force is great. We can work and collaborate together and come up with good solutions.
Is 97, can we?
97 or
there are 97?
I mean, there are all over the county. I mean, there are.
It goes through the whole county.
Yes.
I know we would like to do everywhere at the same time. Sure. If there's a better way to approach than to tackling the corridors one at a time, then we should do that other way. But feels like we ought to, work through the issues sequentially and try to resolve them. Christy, anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, just a couple of things. The reason I'm sitting here today, is because I'm chair of the committee, but because a very dear friend, my child's caregiver, was killed on Georgia Avenue on June 3rd, 2011. Finally, a traffic signal will be installed there this summer, thank you very much, at Georgia in May, where at least 3 people have been killed in the last 10 years. It's taken way too long for that to happen. I think one of the reasons that it has taken so long, aside from the lack of coordination between the state and the county, generally speaking, but one of the reasons is that we're not necessarily looking at these issues and prioritizing them through an equity lens. It seems that a lot of the interventions that are made based on individual requests from council members, from very loud groups of citizens. We need to look at a little bit longer window when we're looking at serious and fatal crashes, because the CIP planning process and the state planning process is 6, 7, 8, 9 years long. My friend at Seganet Harissa, who is a recent immigrant from Ethiopia, she passed away. No one cared. I mean, I cared, her family cared, but it was a blip, and then it was gone. And so I think we really need to take a serious look at communities where people are dying, but they have to use this infrastructure, and they're lacking very, very basic infrastructure. Where I live in Wheaton, the Viersma corridor I mentioned, the local elementary school where my child goes to school is 88% free and reduced lunch, 55% English as a second language. Those are not the people you're going to hear from here at this council meeting. I'm here, and I'm representing that community, but I don't speak Spanish. My kids don't have free and reduced lunch. I have the luxury of being able to take annual leave from my job to be here. Other people don't have those opportunities. So I would just ask you as a council and as MCDOT and as State Highways to make sure that you're really looking at these issues from an equity perspective and making sure that those people who don't have access to basic pedestrian infrastructure are able to get to school and to work and to very basic needs of living on foot and through public transportation. That's all.
Thank you, Christy. Appreciate that. Captain, if you'd like to add.
Yes, for Mr. Slater's benefit, I've had the blessing of being the champion for police department and traffic for well over a decade. And the Lord and Mr. Elwood's willing, I'll finish my career doing the same thing. One of the blessings.
That's new.
That's calling it square, right? One of the blessings is I go out to the traffic crashes. So having this discussion has been very refreshing and very vitalizing, because living this is very important, and knowing that everybody in this room gets how important this is huge. I think the task force is the right approach. Oftentimes, the police department and the community perspective aren't necessarily shared. They're not shared in the development of the MUTCD. But where police officers are out on the road every day, we have observations that I believe we can contribute to the engineers who have the technical knowledge, and collectively, I think we can make better decisions. Some observations that came to mind when I was listening to all the discussions, and it kind of is common sense to us, but it doesn't equate technically, is any road that you have a lot of pedestrian traffic or school bus stops on should not be more than 40 miles an hour on an arterial roadway, because pedestrians just can't cross. You can calculate the time, and it just doesn't work. We've seen it. It's important. The lighting at the intersections have to be the new LED bright. I remember going to the fatal at Georgia Avenue and Reedy Drive and almost striking a pedestrian myself, going 35 miles an hour, because I was intentionally looking that whole traverse stretch, because we've had 5 crashes, and I was just taking it all in at 4 o'clock in the morning. And I realized that at our intersections where our pedestrians are, the lights are just as yellow as they were throughout. So we know you can't have the really bright lighting everywhere, but you can have it at that intersections where you're going to see the pedestrian. I realize the fact that if we are going to put a mid-block crossing, you have to have a signalization. Those stripe lines that we talked about aren't a force field. Unfortunately, pedestrians sometimes think that that is a force field because I have right of way, but that doesn't mean you're going to be right. You're going to be dead right. Education campaign is what's sorely missing more than anything. I'll speak at radio shows, TV, I'll even wear a signboard, as Mr. Reamer will tell you, if I can get the message out. But we need to come up with a universal now. They stole Jeff Dunkel, so they have access to an expert in our field. So we have the opportunity, but we have to work together in the next campaign to ensure that we do have an education campaign, that we get out to the community, and we have to involve the community in being part of that education campaign. It's not a one-way conversation. And finally, I know you've made some tremendous improvements in your OOTs with some of your staffing, but we're coming into a new RFP with our red light cameras. Okay. And we had about 20 permits rejected by SHA the last time we went there. Those were red light cameras that normally generated from initial complaints from our community, that we validated, worked with our DOT, that we verified that they were engineeringly sound, and they were denied because of interjection by OOTs where it didn't meet the value. And as we talked about today, if we're going to be putting up signals and we're going to be putting up there, we can't staff it with a cop every time. So we have to use the technology to be smarter and harder. And I think that's a collective, comprehensive approach where we can work together and we can understand where it does the right turn on reds and it does the pedestrian safety enhancements and it makes people slow down and don't do the red lights so that we can have a win-win. I think collectively that's where in combining police, community, and DOT and these task forces, I think will help us make better decisions, not necessarily cost more money, but hopefully just make it safer so we can get down towards zero.
All right, thank you very much for being here, Greg Slater, and all of our county representatives, and appreciate the dialogue, and we appreciate your observations about the new day at SHA, and we're going to keep working together to bring the improvements to safety that our community needs.
Thank you.
Thank you. And so I need a motion for a proposed closed session for the thank you. It's for the purpose of consulting with counsel to obtain legal advice and to consult about pending or potential litigation pursuant to Maryland Code General Provisions Article 3-305B7 and 8. Topic is retaining outside counsel. It's been moved by Mr. Katz, seconded by Mr. Wrights. All those in favor of going into closed session, raise your hands. And that is unanimous among those present. And we are going to the 6th floor.